Good evening. We're here for the special January 29, 2015 meeting of the Brattleboro Selectboard, and I call that meeting to order. We welcome everybody who's in attendance, members of the press, and everybody who's watching now or who's going to be watching later on. The first matter on tonight's agenda is public participation. If there's anybody who wants to speak to any issue that's not on our agenda, this would be a good time. Is there anybody who's in attendance who wants to speak to something that's not on the agenda? All right, well then I'll very briefly note that following the storm event on Tuesday, as a result of some equipment problems, we haven't been able, as effectively as we would have liked, to do snow removal from the sidewalks and the streets. We had planned to be doing snow removal downtown last night, but the equipment wasn't ready to do that, and the sidewalk snow plow was broken as well, and so we only got to do 20% of the sidewalks until it was repaired. That equipment has been repaired, we're glad to say, and the sidewalks have now been fully plowed. But I understand we're expecting 1 to 3 inches tonight maybe, and 1 to 3 inches tomorrow. We're not going to declare any kind of snow emergency, you know.
Shut down the schools.
But the fact is that we're going to be waiting to do the downtown snow plowing and snow removal until after this next round of anticipated snow, probably till tomorrow evening. We should note, however, and in connection with this, that snow is piled up on the roads and visibility can be low. And we encourage everybody, please, to take care both while driving and while walking. There was collision not just yesterday on the interstate, but also there was a crash between a vehicle and a pedestrian right on the east side of the courthouse. Crosswalks are not force fields, and people need to make sure that they can be seen when they step out into the street, and drivers need to make sure that they're looking for pedestrians in the road, and we encourage everybody, please, to take due care when operating and walking on the streets, particularly when there's a lot of snow around. And then I also understand they say that temperatures are supposed to drop somewhere to 10 or 20 below tomorrow night, so everybody's urged once again to take appropriate care.
That's the weather forecast.
That's the weather forecast. Any other public participation? Sorry for that interlude. And so the next item on the agenda is the FY16 budget. Under the FY16 budget, we have 2 items, the Museum and Arts Center and the general budget approval. Before going into those 2 specific items, I'm going to talk a little bit about the agenda that we've got before us tonight. And the timing and scheduling and structure of the agenda and what we're hoping to achieve. The budget was first presented to us in late October of 2014 by the interim town manager at the time, and we've been working diligently since that time to make sure that we've done due diligence with respect to that budget, to hear explanations for things that are included in the budget, things that have been taken out of the budget, and then to try to make decisions that are in the best interest of the town about the budget to present to town meeting. And there have been a series of related issues that we've dealt with. We've looked at the local option sales tax possibility. We've looked at spending the unassigned fund balance. The timing of our discussion has really been guided, I think, for everybody on the board by making sure that everybody's had as much time as possible to comment and to speak to the budget and to tell us their views about what's being presented for approval at town meeting. There's been some suggestion that maybe we've been delaying because we've got hard decisions to make. In fact, when we were here at the last select board meeting on January 20th, our new town manager had just started that day. And we really wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity to consult with him and with each other and with everybody who's in the town to the greatest extent possible in order to present the most informed budget that we could. And so this has really been a natural progression to today, where we're going to be approving and considering the various articles and the warning. I would encourage everybody who's got anything to say about any of these articles to speak up today. I would encourage all members of the board to do that, and all members of the public who are here. This is not scheduled as a quick rubber stamp on a warning. That's already been finalized. There are still open issues to be considered and discussed. And, you know, I note that there's nobody else running for select board besides incumbents. But by no means should it be thought that everybody on the board holds the same view, because I expect there's going to be a series of 3-2 and 4-1 votes on a various range of topics. And there's, you know, a healthy range of views on the board about a lot of the issues that are up for decision tonight. And I urge everybody to speak up about those issues. I know I'm going to be expressing my view on those matters as we go forward. As to the Museum and Arts Center item, which is number 1, unless anybody's got something to say in general about that? Nope. Or anybody who's in attendance?
Yes.
Yes, Chris. Wait, not about the museum yet, just about that general statement. Anybody got something that they want to add? Cool. So as the Museum and Arts Center, last Tuesday, we took the $7,000 for the Museum and Arts Center out because we hadn't had communications from the museum, and town managers had some communications with them, and maybe, Peter, you could explain about the misunderstanding about the deadline and what the $7,000 request is about.
Sure. There had been communication between the town manager's office, Mr. Moreland, and the representatives at the museum in advance of that meeting on the 20th, but there was a misunderstanding about the deadline for the museum to send in a formal request for the continuation of the $7,000 item. We received that request the day after the meeting, last week on the 21st. And given that it was quite clear that it wasn't negligence on the part of the museum, but just a misunderstanding between the parties, it seemed reasonable that we would come back to you this evening and ask that you reinsert that $7,000. There's a very long-standing, 40 years plus relationship between the museum and the town, and it's a contribution the town makes to assist in the process of keeping the property in good shape. The museum certainly invests far more than that itself in the facility. So staff is happy to recommend that you reinsert the $7,000 before you do the final action on the budget.
And the building that we're contributing the $7,000 for, and the property, who owns it?
The town owns the property. It's the former railway station at the foot of Main Street Hill.
Does anybody have any questions from the board about that request to put the $7,000 back in?
I have no question. We're fine. I'm fine with that.
Okay. So why don't we start by getting a motion, or any comments about it? All right, why don't we start by getting a motion?
I'll do it. I mean, I'll move to put $7,000, I don't even want to say it, into the budget to go towards the Brattleboro Museum and Arts Center
Maintenance.
maintenance.
Formally, the motion by Kate would be to reinstate $7,000 into the FY16 budget for ongoing maintenance and repairs at the Brattleboro Museum and Arts Center.
Wow.
Is that what you meant to say?
Exactly.
Excellent.
More
So, is there any further discussion about that? I know, Mr. Chapman, you're here to speak to it. Do you want to do that?
Sure.
All right. Anybody who's presenting tonight for any period of time is going to be asked to go to the table. The meeting is being broadcast live, but we only have one camera. But people who are going to be speaking from the floor are asked to go to the mic. So you can go to the mic. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Thank you. Actually, I spent several hours preparing for this because I didn't know what kind of reception it would have. And recognizing how long your agenda is, I'd be happy to keep it short. I don't know where we stand. Is there any controversy about this, about putting it back in the budget?
I don't think there's any controversy.
I don't think there is.
Well, why don't I just say it's just wonderful to see you again.
Thank you.
And good to see you, Chris.
Thank you. It's nice to be back here as a civilian.
Come again.
Thank you. Oh, and let me take an opportunity to plug the museum. There's the a cappella concert's coming up on the 7th. That's a museum fundraiser, benefits the museum. And also there are 2 ongoing shows that people should really be interested in. Senator Leahy's exclusive photos from his decades of Senate experience, and also the works of 38 regional artists whose work was chosen from more than 1,000 entries from around New England in an open call. It's a really interesting exhibit, and just think everybody would be well advised to go for their own enjoyment and to learn something. And so, thank you, folks.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Is there any further comment or questions from anybody about including the $7,000 for ongoing maintenance and repairs at the Museum and Art Center in the budget?
Hope it doesn't turn out to be a 3-2 vote.
That's not this one, though.
He'll go right through the roof.
Hearing no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Thank you, Chris, for your good work.
Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah. So the next item is the general FY16 budget. And I'm going to start by giving a quick summary, because I think it's important that we just explain the difference in broad strokes between last year's budget and this year's budget. The budget that's going to be presented for approval right now, unless something changes, is in the amount of $15,721,494. And that includes capital plan of $1 million as well, and we'll talk to that a little bit in a minute. There are some significant changes between the budget that was approved last year and the budget that's presented for approval this year. I think it's important to speak to those because there's a change, at least in the way the budget's now presented, in some of the underlying premises for the money that's being spent and where it's coming from. And it's not exactly linear how we get from last year to this year, so I want to explain it. If this budget's adopted, it proposes an increase in $284,860 in property taxes, which is a 2% property tax increase, 2 cents per hundred. Now, last year, as part of our $15,881,000 budget, which is $160,000 more than this year. In last year's budget, we used $510,540 from surplus to fund operations. So that was $310,540 left over from the skating rink, repair money, and $200,000 more just from fund balance. So $500,000 in cash came from the savings account to help fund operations last year. This year, we have to make a decision later on in the agenda whether we're going to be spending money from the surplus, and if so, how. But right now, this budget as presented doesn't propose to or spend money from surplus for operations. We also have changed the way we're dealing with transfers into and out of the general operating fund. Specifically, we took a look at how money goes back and forth between this general operating fund and the enterprise funds. That's including the utilities fund, which is for water and sewer, and the parking fund. And the transfers are in balance $77,000 to the benefit of the operating fund and to the detriment of the utility of the enterprise funds. So we've got $77,000 more in the budget from things that actually are properly allocated to enterprise funds, water and sewer and parking, rather than the general fund. And we've got some other revenue where there's a small difference of about $11,000. There's a series of increases and decreases in spending, and I'll speak to those briefly. We've got cumulatively about $206,000, almost $207,000 for salary increases. Some of that is contracted already and we're committed to already based upon current labor agreements. We have 3 collective bargaining agreements that are up for negotiation this year. And we've put money in the budget to cover the possibility of wage increases, but we haven't reached agreement with those labor unions. And that has yet to unfold, and we don't know what the result is going to be. There's some increases in department monies, about $40,000. I'm not going to go into the specifics, except I think one of those has to do with very significant increase for road salt. Would that be fair to say, Steve?
Yes.
Benefits, insurance are going up about $70,000. There's been discussion about the transition to pay-as-you-throw. We anticipate generating about $355,000 from the sales of bags, and our solid waste disposal costs in total are going down an additional about $70,000 because we're doing more recycling and more composting, so we're tipping less at the dump. So we're both getting revenue in from the bags and saving money because of people composting and recycling. We had about a $10,000 swing, which is pretty small in the grand scheme of things, on human services, because we approved 120, based upon the understanding that last year we had approved 120,000, but actually last year we approved 110, and we didn't go back to take that money back. But human services now totals 120. And there's transfer to capital, which is going to wind up being very complicated, and I'll explain it briefly. We've got capital items that we're spending on that total $1 million. It includes a new grader, a new dump truck, a new vehicle for the assistant fire chief, 2 new police cruisers, and $300,000 in paving. Now, 4 of those items totaling $630,000 and change are being financed over a 5-year period. Their lifespans are longer than 5 years, so it's appropriate to finance them over 5 years. The rest of that capital expenditure is being paid out of cash. That's out of taxes. And so there's a little bit of a discrepancy in the way in which those numbers were calculated before and how the motion's being presented tonight to the tune of about $11,000. And rather than revising the entire budget, we're going to plan on saving $11,000 out of the $15 million budget and financing the $631 in those capital expenses, which should be borrowed. We should be borrowing money to buy them. And then other things like an annual paving budget, that's coming out of cash. And then this budget also includes $140,000 and small change for borrowing on the police fire facility. And the way that number was determined is that we would need $4.7 million to do construction to completion of Central Station and West Brattleboro Station. And we included then another $1 million to purchase real property, including a building, to be determined up on Putney Road. And this is the interest $140,000 on that $4.7 million that would be needed to take that next step in the police fire project. So those are a lot of changes to the budget going both ways, but the total picture, unless something changes, for example, with money being taken out of the budget or money being put in from the surplus, the total picture is spending of $160,000 less than last year through the general fund, but it turns out to be a 2% increase in taxes, which is about, I don't have the number right in front of me, it's about $50 on it's about $50 on a $100,000 house. $49 on a $100,000 house. So I've got some views and comments to express about that, but I'm not going to do that now. I'm going to wait till other people have had a chance to express anything they have to say, but that overview was necessary so that people could understand what this budget represents. And so I'm going to ask anybody who's on the board if they have any comments they want to make, and then we'll open it up to anybody from the floor, and I'll, recognize myself at some point. Anybody on the board?
I'll go first. You want to go first?
No, go ahead.
First, we did work extremely hard to get to where we got. And I think we avoided some of the things that we had to talk about last year, which was, cutting staff. We avoided doing that. I think we added, the things we added back in for the capital spending was a good thing. Saying that, I have, the last time we voted on this, I voted against the budget. And I'm going to vote against it tonight if it stays as we're looking at it on this piece of paper. I do not think, and some people have heard this, but I'll say it again, I don't think at this point it's prudent to be taking out another bond for the police fire facility until we have a plan for the police department. And I really don't like the idea of putting money in for a property that we have no idea what we're purchasing. And I think it needs to be vetted better. I think the public needs an opportunity to be involved in the process. As I said, I would like to know what the plan is because I don't know what it is. So I'm at the same place that I was the last time that we voted for this. And as long as that money is in there for the police fire bond, I'm going to, once again, vote no on this budget. So that's where I am in a very succinct, short speech.
Thank you, Kate. Anybody else from the board want to speak?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'll
No, I'm going to wait a long time.
I didn't plan on speaking so quickly, but I understand Kate's concerned about it. We had a very interesting police fire meeting last night, and Peter was able to join us. And I think that and I'm not trying to change your mind, because it's not going to happen. But what I want to explain is that some things came to light last night that shed a little bit of a different scenario on the way this project is going to go forward. Because one of the things that came out of the meeting, and Peter, correct me if I'm getting all this correct, or not correct, or incorrect. There's a little bit of a discussion on whether we have the right to be able to ask for this money legally and be able to go out for bond because we have separated a little bit from the original bond vote. And it's pulling out the police station. The fire stations have not changed at all, not one bit. They are the same as they were. So that is where we're in a little bit of a, and I think, Bob, you might be looking into that, or is there any clarification at this point? I don't think there is, but.
I'll speak to that after you're done
Yeah.
making your comments. I can
Okay.
speak to the opinion we need.
And so that's kind of where we're at, because I still want to proceed with this, because we have taken out $5 million. We have spent $1 million. We cannot do anything with that $4 million. It's just sitting there. And to me, that's a travesty, that we've already spent that money. It was approved. And you can argue whether it was a good or bad thing. That's a moot point. It's already been taken out. We cannot pay it back early. It's a 15-year note.
Correct.
We're paying an awful lot of money for money. It's like buying a car and letting it sit at Auto Mall and not driving it and paying the payment on it. It's absolutely ridiculous that we're doing this. And so that's why I feel that we have to get this project going. We have to get these done and to move on. The police end of it, it's going to be another story. And I want everybody to be vetted on that. I want everybody to be involved in that. But for me, as far as the fire stations are going, to me, that's a done deal. And we have to use that money, spend it, let's get it over with, and let's move on. So that's where I am. But there is this little bit of a glitch.
Sure, go ahead now.
Okay. My understanding of the action that the board previously took, I believe it was back in December, was that you wish to put the money that's been discussed previously that would amount to $140,000 of additional expense in this year's budget into this year's budget in order to be ready to move forward during this fiscal year with the project. Understanding that the northern alternatives for a police station that's not at this site required quite a lot more due diligence, and that you wanted to begin to undertake that work so that that idea of possibly having the police station on the north side of town could become an alternative that you could consider for action. So that's the status at this moment, as I understand it, is that it'll be staff's responsibility to go and conduct the due diligence and bring back to you the information that allows you to make a decision about how to go forward. And the police fire committee that has been providing advice to you would receive information from us as well and be able to provide additional advice to you about the next steps in the process. It was not my understanding of your intent from the December action that you wished to separate the police station portion of the project from the fire stations portion of the project in order to proceed with construction on the fire portions while we're working, doing the additional work that needs to be done in order to get to the point of being able to make a decision on police. I understood. I don't know if it was accurate or not. I'll find out more about that as you discuss it tonight. But I understood that it was still intended to be a project with 3 parts in the action that you had taken. Because of that, it has also been my clear understanding that before we could issue the additional debt and go forward with construction of the projects, that we'd need to go back to town meeting. We won't be ready for the town meeting in March of this year, so my expectation has been we would be doing the due diligence work and making decisions during the next several months, and at some point in the coming year would go to a special town meeting and address this full question of moving forward. At the Police Fire Committee meeting yesterday, there was some extensive discussion of the possibility that because the fire projects are not being further debated and the emphasis of your action, the last recommendation that you had received in December from the Police Fire Committee and the action that you had taken as a board in December was focused on the additional information you need about the police facility in order to make a decision about that piece of it. There was consideration, and there was actually a recommendation made by the Police Fire Committee that I'm sure they would want to speak to themselves. I don't mean to speak for them, but the essence of which was this should in toto move forward as quickly as possible. And that one element of that from their perspective would be that the fire station projects are ready to go and the town should move as expeditiously as possible to move forward with those while separately further developing the police idea into an alternative and into to the point where decisions can be made. So that raised a question that I can't answer tonight, that we will go and get the information necessary so that you can make a decision in the future about it. But bond counsel will need to give an opinion as to whether or not any additional action at town meeting is required in order to be able to issue the debt and proceed with construction on the fire facilities if they are separated from the police facility. There's absolutely no question that if the police northern alternative or some other alternative off of this site becomes the action and the plan that we're going to implement, that's going to require additional action at town meeting. But I don't know the answer to whether or not additional action by town meeting would be required to authorize the issuance of that debt and the construction of the fire facilities.
So under that
where that
light, yes, thank you, Peter. And under that light, that's where I still feel that the project is still under one umbrella. And the only thing that we're trying to buy a little time for is between now and representative town meeting to find out from council or from the bond bank whether it is okay to proceed the way we're going. And I still think that they're still under one. Is there a problem?
No, when you're finished, I want to say
Oh,
something.
okay. Okay. I thought I had no, I'm good.
I thought you were on your way to being finished, so I wanted to say something.
You never know with me.
I did my best, John. We've been together a long time. I want to make sure the question that's for discussion is the budget, and the 140 is part of the budget. But the merits of exactly how we're going to move forward or not move forward with the police fire is not what's on the agenda. So I think what John just said and what Peter just said certainly is germane enough. But I don't want to have a lengthy discussion tonight about what's happening exactly with the police fire. And we're going to ask people to not get into a in-depth discussion of the police fire related issues. I think there's some understanding that's necessary, like I say, for a decision whether the 140 is in or not. But it's not a separate item for discussion tonight, the police fire.
Well,
John?
the only reason I brought it up is because Kate mentioned that the reason why she's not voting for the budget is because of that one factor. And so I just wanted to, and I don't want to get into a big debate on the police fire, but I just wanted to make sure that, what my conditions were on voting for the budget. So
Totally, and
Yep. I agree. It can be, that can go on for a long time
and it will when the time comes.
when the time comes.
Anybody else? Donna?
I would like to just say briefly, and I really want to hear, am anxiously awaiting hearing from our community and in public participation around this budget. But my vote for this budget was not to disregard the impact of a tax increase, which is a burden for the members of this community, but it was to make possible forward momentum on the police fire facility, and I think it needs to come back to the people of the town for final approval. But it felt really important for me in presenting this budget to allow for that possibility that we have forward momentum once we have landed in the same place on what that should look like. So I just wanted to say that. I totally agree and support doing a much broader long-term planning and having at least the illusion of more spaciousness to make major decisions like this one. That feels really important for us to be able to make those decisions and come to an agreement and move forward with whatever action steps from a very clear, grounded, thoughtful place.
You want to speak?
You're good.
Okay. I think the fundamental question is balancing the burden that's placed on taxpayers against the town's operating and capital needs. And I felt when we took the initial vote in 2011 that the $14 million was too much money to spend on the police and fire facilities if we didn't have an additional revenue source. And I said that at the time. And after the town voted to proceed with it, my responsibility on the select board was to execute on that decision. But I think that I've said very clearly that I thought the rejection of the budget by referendum was a clear indication that, as a general matter, people think their taxes are too high, and adding 8 cents to the tax levy in order to build the police fire facilities for $14 million, I think is too much money. And I've said it before, and I'll continue to hold that position. I think work needs to be done at those facilities, but I think a long-term view that balances operating and capital needs against our ability to pay is the core challenge that faces us. And I don't think that that balancing has yet been undertaken. And I think it's premature to include that $140,000 in the budget. So that was why I voted with Kate not to include the $140,000 in the budget. I think that we have a new town manager on board who will work with us to review our town operations, to look at all our capital needs, to make sure that our processes and our planning is up to the task of dealing with the repairs that are necessary at those facilities and a lot of other things we face. And then we should be making the decision with all that information in hand. Now, tonight the question is whether we're going to vote to approve the $15,721,497 budget for presentation to town meeting. And I think that I've come to the position that I'm going to vote in favor of that budget for presentation at town meeting. But if somebody else doesn't do it, I'm going to move a town meeting to reduce the budget by $140,000. And then we'll have a discussion about whether that interest should be in there now or whether we should have the full plan for the police fire before we put the money in the budget. But I'm going to vote for it today because I think that we're going back to town meeting for this, and we're going to be going back to town meeting yet again, seeking authorization later on. But I'll vote in favor of it tonight. You want to speak now, or you want to wait till others do? Go ahead.
No. I think, as is often the case, John put his finger on it, I think, better than anybody when he mentioned that more light was shed on the project last night. And it struck me that over the however many years this has been going on, more light is continually shed on this project. And there will never be a time when all the questions are answered. And every time we answer a question, more questions come up. When we answer the question about should we put the police station on the back of this building, it brought up a whole bunch more questions. When we asked the question about should it go along Putney Road, a whole bunch more questions. We answered the question about should we go forward with the fire projects and hold off the police and just put earnest money in there to keep that project moving, more questions. We're never going to not have those questions. I don't think it's our job to decide whether this goes forward. It's the job of the town representatives. It's the job of the town meeting. And by having this $140,000 in there, it makes that conversation happen. And that conversation needs to happen. We've had a number of votes on this question. We're going to have one more at town meeting. And that's exactly how it should happen. That's our job, to bring this information to the town, to provide as much information as possible so the reps can make a good decision. I think by March, we're going to know more than we know now. And if we can't go forward, if we hear from the bond people we can't go forward, we can amend the budget and take that money out. We don't have to use it. If we don't put it in, then nothing's going to happen from police fire for a good long time. Unless, well, we could have a special meeting and try it that way, but that's not the best way. The best way is to do it in March at town meeting, which is the way the system is designed and evolved over decades to make decisions like this. That's it for me.
Thank you. Anybody else from the board at this time? So I'm going to make the motion to approve the budget, and then we'll see whether there's anybody else who's in attendance who wants to speak to it. So I'm going to make the motion, and then we'll take comments from anybody else who's in
Peter,
attendance.
turn on the motion recorder.
Yeah. And I should explain what's going on here. We have our recorder, which is recording the entirety of the meeting, but the last item for business tonight is approval of the warning. And any of the motions that are made and then approved or not approved will play into the final language of the warning. So we've got a separate tape recorder going, which I've now messed up because I'm prattling on, explaining what's going on. But we're recording the motions so that Jan can then go and fix the warning before we vote on it at the end of the meeting. So I move to approve for placement on the town meeting warning and for presentation of representative town meeting fiscal year 2016 general fund budget with revenue and expenditures in the amount of $15,721,497, and to approve the fiscal year 2016 capital plan with expenditures of $1 million and revenue of $632,000 from loans and a transfer from the general fund of $357,000. So that's the budget motion. Now, since the board's all spoken, anybody who's in attendance like to speak to this? Mr. Dimes?
Hi, I'm Kurt Dimes. I live in Brattleboro, District 2. I appreciate what Kate said about the fairness of the process. And I want to point out that I'm just very confused about the position of the board right now. We're getting very confusing and disturbing messages about the process. We're supposed to listen to John and everyone else, and John said something about let's go ahead with the momentum, and then we're not supposed to speak about the police fire project. Last May, we had budget hearings, public hearings, at which the public was denied, again, the right to talk about the police fire project. And then at the following representative town meeting for the budget, again, it was specifically on the agenda that people should not talk about the police fire project. And at that time, the reasonable excuse was that it would be settled soon. Now, and it was in the news twice since then that, oh, we haven't decided about the police fire project. And since deciding twice that there should be no discussion about it, we've decided to spend $4.7 million. That's way skewed. That is exactly the opposite of what Kate is suggesting. We can't say, oh, everybody don't talk about it, oh, and we'll talk about it later, and actually we're not going to talk about it later, we're just going to spend the $4.7 million. That's what the board has done. That's not right. And John spoke about, keeping the momentum. That sounds like a good thing. Boulders have momentum. And one more thing you mentioned, John. The car that we bought, the loan we take out, I have spoken to Mr. Giroux, the executive director of the executive director of the bond bank. And he says that we can put that money towards other capital expenses. This is something else that people were not allowed to talk about at the last representative town meeting in May. So the money does not have to be spent. It could be spent on the police fire project. It can be spent on other capital expenses and bring the budget down and reduce the tax burden. Thank you.
Yes, please. I forgot your name.
George Reed.
Mr. Reed Savory. Last week I said Mr. Savory Reed. I'm sorry. Mr. Reed Savory.
I answered a lot of it. The thing that occurs to me is we're doing exactly the same thing we did last year. This was in the budget last year. The town reps approved it. We put it to a town vote, so we turned it over to the town. The town voted against it. So it seems to me we've heard what the town wants to do on this. And we're looking for something different. We're looking for some different suggestions. You've been asked several times, what would it cost for just the things for safety, health and safety? We've never gotten that sort of figure. So I think that the town has already decided. I mean, we can put it back out for a vote again, but this is the same thing we did last year, same numbers. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reese Avery. Ms. Jordan?
We're talking about a budget, and we're talking about the security of all of our citizens. We're talking about the safety of all of our citizens, in which the citizens and the selectmen are talking about finances, which is part of what they have to do. When you look at raising the taxes on a $500,000 home, that's $250 a year. I'm thinking their lives are worth $250 extra every year to make sure that they're safe from fire, from vandalism, from drug addicts trying to break in. We have to start thinking, and I'm the last person that will say this, we really do have to start thinking of our future, especially with a lot of things that are going on here in town. We need a bigger police department. We need to tank some of these people for 72 hours to find out who are the real bad addicts who are dealing. We need to tank some people just to see if they are rolling in from other states to deal. We have to think of our safety more than $250 a year extra for a $500,000 home in taxes. And I don't always agree with the police department, and they know that. But they need a bigger place. They do not need it with the fire department. That's going to cause an emergency traffic jam. If you go by what's happened in Chicago, they put the police and fire department side by side, one on one side of the building, one on the other side of the building. Cause a major traffic jam downtown. We need to keep them where we have emergency vehicles in all parts of town. Putney Road, West Brattleboro, Canal Street. Those are strategic areas for them to get through, to help us as people. So when you go to vote on this budget, just remember, if you own a $500,000 home, I'm sure you can afford $250 extra a year. And if you don't own one, well, then you don't have to pay that much, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Kimbria Badenhausen, and I moved into Brattleboro in September. I believe I'm in District 2. I wanted to talk to you about the financial aspect of this project. I know that some of you are familiar with a funding program called Sustainable Energy Funding Program, and that's a nonprofit that's based in Massachusetts. Originally, the idea of the organization was brought to you as part of energy efficiency projects in town. I'm the one who brought the knowledge of this organization to town when I moved here, and I have worked with other communities to bring this funding program in, and they're successfully working on capital projects that are funded over very long periods of time, like 25 years, very low interest rates. It's actually much easier to fund than bond projects. It's 1% to 3%, and you have to have 3 years of audited financials. You have to have the money pass through a municipal or nonprofit organization. It's very, very simple. These projects are happening all over the city of Philadelphia's doing a lot of projects. I just want to make sure that Peter, I don't think Peter was here when this was originally discussed. I wanted to bring this to your attention. I work with sustainable capital projects, and I help rate them for sustainability. So I really would love to offer my services to work with you to bring more of this information with you. The gentleman who runs the organization travels a lot, but I've been working with him for almost a year on projects, and I can give you a lot of the information myself without having to bring him in. We can do it very quickly, so you may be able to present this information sometime relatively soon. So I just wanted to make that available to you, and I can speak to you afterward and give you my
That'd be
contact
great.
information.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Turnus? I do. It was late last week.
I just have, Catherine Turnus, District 3. I just have a couple clarifying things. This building has been found not environmentally sustainable, and to the amount of over $400,000. Is that something that's going to be handled through what you spoke tonight? And also, the pay-as-you-throw. Now, if I recall from the last town meeting, there was a line item, I think it was something like $300,000 that was part of the tipping fee situation. Is that going to be cleared up with the bag sales? And what happens at that point? Is it still a line item, or it has been moved over?
Two
my
excellent questions.
Two questions,
Thank-
yes.
Yes, two excellent questions, I said. Thank you. The first inquiry from Catherine relates to, I think, the life safety, the fire safety code violations at the municipal center. And it is accurate that we've got preliminary estimate of around $450,000 to repair fire code related issues within the municipal center. A plan for how to respond to that over time is being developed. And so that money is not in the operating budget as presented. We do have a separate article we're going to be considering for taking money from the surplus to cover various potential, essentially non-recurring capital expenses. And one of those potential targets of the surplus money could be the municipal center repairs, if that item is approved by the board in that form and then approved by town meeting. So I hope that answers your question as to the municipal center issue. As to the pay-as-you-throw, the total garbage budget for the town is about $950,000, right, Patrick? $950,000? And this budget removes all of those fees and puts them into a separate budget for tracking purposes. And then money is transferred out of the operating budget and into the garbage budget. And then maybe I won't call it the garbage budget, the solid waste budget. And then
Sustainable plan.
the solid waste budget. And then there's transfers back in as well. So the solid waste budget in total is about $950,000. And at this point, we anticipate about $355,000 from bag sales. And that will be coming in through the operating budget, but then it'll be applied to the solid waste budget. And then we're going to be transferring an additional like $550,000 from the operating budget into the solid waste budget in order to pay the remainder of the expenses, which include the cost for recycling pickup, the cost for compost pickup, and whatever costs would not be covered by the pay-as-you-throw. So your brow is furrowed, but do you understand generally?
Kind of.
Okay. And I will note, and I'm going to be saying this during Chair's remarks on Tuesday's meeting, that the Solid Waste Committee, the Pay-As-You-Throw Committee has made a request to make a presentation to the Select Board and to everybody in town who's interested in participating about exactly what the Pay-As-You-Throw program is going to look like. We've had a number of presentations at Select Board, but we think that we need a broader presentation really to roll out the entirety of the program and to begin the education effort as broadly as possible. So at this point, the plan is to have a special meeting of the Select Board sometime in the first 2 weeks in February in order to just deal with the pay-as-you-throw program. The budget as constructed includes what I've talked about, which is, $950,000 for solid waste disposal, $355 for the bags, revenue from the bags, and the rest of it coming out of the operating money. Anybody else who want to speak to anything relating to the budget? Ms. Cartwright?
Good evening, Lori Cartwright, Brattleboro, District 3. I apologize, I have not had a chance to review the budget in careful scrutiny, but I just have one question, and I'm hopeful the answer is yes. Has this board developed a mechanism whereby people with a low income would be able to purchase a bag at a reduced price, or perhaps bags that would be offered to people of low income at no cost? I was a member of town meeting a number of years ago when this proposal was being developed, and it was denied, I think, in large part at that time because of the concern that it would have a broad impact on those members of our community who are least able to afford it, and there would be some very undesirable effects on hoarding, dumping, things of that nature, which none of us want to see happen.
Thank you, Lori, for that question. I'm going to note that, once again, how pay-as-you-throw is going to be structured is not really a topic for discussion tonight. I will briefly respond that we have addressed the issue about low-cost bags at least once in prior meetings, and we have preliminarily decided that we would not be offering low-cost bags through the town, primarily, as I understood the decision of the board, because the Vermont legislature made the decision to impose pay-as-you-throw statewide and to use financial incentives in order to bring everybody in the community to the point where they're taking their recyclables and they're taking their compost out of the solid waste stream, and so that only what can't be composted and can't be recycled is going into the landfill. And that has to apply across the board to everybody, and giving free bags would create no incentive to people who are getting free bags to engage in that separation into multiple waste streams. But that's a topic for the meeting that we're going to have, the special meeting in February. And so it's not a topic for broad discussion here tonight, but I thought I'd answer the question.
Okay, I appreciate it, thank you.
Sure. Mr. Agave.
Spoon Agave, District 3. I have asked the question, and I will ask it again, and it'll be asked at town meeting, is what will our taxes be in 5 years? And I ask that because, not counting the police and fire project, there's about $15 million worth of other capital expenses already written in the plan over that period of time, 5 years. And there may be a lot more yet. There have been two issues all along. One is the affordability of this project, and the other is the comprehensive nature of planning. It's that latter, that comprehensive nature, that comprehensive planning, that has so much to do with that other $15 million and more that will become necessities. And as of yet, only Board Member McComber is talking about comprehensive planning. It appears all the rest of you are still stuck on the very original project that limits the scope to the fire and police. So it's not so, although it's nice to hear one board member talk about comprehensive planning, it's not clear that that will ever happen. If it does not happen, we go year by year by year piling on one project after another, and always feeling like each one in turn has to be done, and somehow unable to deal with the budget, the debt, the cost of living in this town, et cetera, in its entirety. So I don't know, there is some sense to leaving that $140,000 in the budget now and forcing the issue at town meeting. I'm not sure where that actually gets us. I mean, I know the three who are voting for the project are hoping that town meeting will pass it. And in some fashion, this project will go forward. Then again, that may be removed. If it's removed, then you're just 2 months further down the line with no progress. In fact, even if it passes, you're in no different of a place than you are right now in terms of planning. So it would seem to make life easier if you just pull that $140,000 out right now. Nevertheless, the question is going to be, what will our taxes be in 5 years, given what you have in the town capital plan right now?
Mr. Chairman? Thank you. I'd like to reassure you, Mr. Gavi, and everybody who's here and everybody who's listening that we are just at this moment beginning to undertake such an effort. And I want to make it really clear that while one board member has spoken to it this evening, in the interviewing process through which I was hired last October, the 5 of them, individually and collectively, made it very clear to me that there is an expectation from the board to have such an effort undertaken. And the staff and I have already discussed how to move forward with that. Of course, I've been here for just a little over a week, so I can't tell you exactly how we're going to do that, but in the future select board meetings, I'll be able to talk in much greater detail about the effort that we're going to undertake and the moments at which we're going to come back into public settings and review our work. And this will be a very collaborative process to assess the town's finances of where we are and where we're headed. It'll include operating and capital. And by this time next year, when budget decisions are being made, they'll be being made in the context of a long-term financial plan.
Anybody else want to speak to the, thank you, Peter. Anybody else want to speak to the budget motion? Mr. Davis.
Good evening, I'm Andy Davis. I live in District 3. Someone got up a minute ago and made a good comment that we're maybe repeating what happened in the process from last year about police fire, just moving ahead and hoping maybe for a different result. I would say that we've been trying to deal with police and fire for more than 2 years. And there's planning, but there's also priorities. And I feel like the urge that a lot of people feel to deal with this, to move forward with it, is not headlong without consideration. This has been talked about, planned about, and we need to move forward on it. I think that I have rethought my feelings about the local option tax. And I'm just curious whether there's a chance to have that as an article at town meeting. I know that tonight you're trying to finalize those things.
That's on the
Has that
agenda
been
later.
talked about?
It's on the agenda.
It's on the agenda. Because I've rethought that. Because I feel like we can't just, we need new streams of revenue. And I don't know what we're doing to try to build the tax base commercially in this town. I see a lot more commercial building and renovating and new businesses in town that I haven't seen for quite a few years. I think the economy is changing, hopefully growing. I just think that a lot of the frustration about how representative town meeting works, as indicated by the articles to try to change our local form of government, a lot of it is frustration about the budget, frustration about money, hoping that if the system changes, then we can find new answers. But I think it's not the governmental system that's at the root of the problem. The root of the problem is that we have some expensive things we need to do. Taxes may be high, but they're not the only part of our family budgets. And I know that my family made a big change to try to reduce our energy costs. Gasoline has dropped in price. Everyone has a windfall right now in their pocket from the decrease in the price of gasoline. It's a much more complicated equation. I tend to agree with the woman who just got up and said that what we're talking about is $250 on a $500,000 home. There's planning, but there's priorities. I think it's time to move ahead, and as a town meeting rep, if I'm reelected, I'm up for reelection, I'll go on public record. I'm willing to go to town meeting, if reelected, at town meeting day in March, and really consider the local option tax as another, it's got its distasteful aspects to it. But we are a destination town. Just look at the traffic. We have people pouring in and out of this town every day. And I've always listened to town merchants who really don't like the sales tax as it is, and they certainly don't want to increase it. There's other towns in Windham County that have the local option tax because they're also destination towns where people come there. Wilmington, Dover. I don't think it's going to kill Brattleboro for people to throw a dime into the jar when they buy a $10 pair of something, a $10 pair of socks, they're going to throw a dime into the trough. It adds up over time. So I'm just going on, I would like personally, as part of the budget discussion, to talk about another stream of revenue. I think we really need it, and I think we really need to move forward with these projects that we've discussed for a decade. That's my feeling. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Anybody else who's in attendance want to speak to the budget? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Ann Wright. I'm from
Sorry,
District
Ann
3.
Wright.
While I can't fault what Andy, and I'm sorry, I don't know your name, what they're saying about the need for some of these large and important projects to move forward, I would just like to express my concern for the budget as it's presented. I hear we're using surplus funds for part of our operating budget. I've owned a house in town now, I guess, for about 10 years, and I haven't seen my taxes go down, certainly on my property taxes. And while $250 on a $500,000 home is certainly reasonable to expect that somebody can pay it, I can assure you that my house's value is nowhere near that. And as both town and state taxes are rising, and I am a person who has fluctuating income, I don't have a traditional full-time job, I work part-time and I'm partly self-employed. I have watched taxes go up. My insurance expenses for my medical insurance right now have gone up appreciably under the Vermont Health Connect system. It's not just about what, one extra payment is going to do. We have this convergence of events happening right now where, yes, I pay less to drive my car, but I'm paying more for my home fuel oil because, as I usually do, I contracted this year. So that's not much of a windfall other than for the oil company. But so my point is that many of us are seeing our expenses, which are not controllable. I don't know even this year how much I'm going to pay for my health insurance premium. I don't know what I'm going to pay for my taxes. My salary's flat. Services are diminishing. And I find it really unsettling that we're talking about such an expensive project in our town budget that is still so very amorphous. We just don't have enough definition. Certainly those of us who are sitting on this side rather than that side of the table and who are attending the committee meeting for the police and the fire project. So I watched last year on TV as my position on the local options tax wasn't, what's the word I'm looking for? I emailed every single person in my district, and I told them that I was in favor of the tax, and I told them exactly why I was in favor of the tax, and I watched every single person stand up there and support the merchants and not my position. So I don't have a lot of faith at this point of how I'll be represented by my town representatives. So I want to tell you personally, I'm very, very uncomfortable with this budget as it's being presented tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. We're going to hear from somebody who hasn't spoken, if there's anybody. Anybody else want to speak? All right, Mr. Dimes, briefly.
Thank you. About the police fire project, I think it's a little bit of a stretch to talk about planning. I work with Brattleboro Common Sense, and two of our people have been in the town records. We find in the town records the earliest, that is the initial meeting of the Police Fire Advisory Committee from 1989, the very first meeting at which they convened to discuss the project. They did not consider anything but architectural solutions. They did not consider anything but architectural solutions right from the start. So the planning has been really half-planned. The project starting in 1989 is in 1989 and going. Well, it's a convenient date, actually, because our consultant on police matters and emergency services says there is a nationwide trend for fire department fire calls. They have gone down in the last, last 14 years or since 1989. They're down 40% nationwide. And I checked with our fire department. That's consistent. The number of fire calls in Brattleboro is down 40% since 1989. The number of career firemen nationwide, at the same time as the fire calls go down, the number of career firemen is up 40%. In Brattleboro, we have not planned for the decrease in the obvious continued decrease in fire calls. We're still planning on expanding the fire department. And that matter of deciding right from the start that the two main matters of inquiry for the Police Fire Committee in 1989 would be two things: where to build and who to hire to build it. They did not consider, what do we do about the mold besides sell the building or get rid of the building? They did not consider supplementary restraints, which would be an alternative way to address the problem of getting people down the narrow staircase. That's a $2 million project. The supplementary restraint is $2,000. So there has not been planning, and we should not run ahead and use momentum to excuse this exorbitant project. Thank you.
The motion on the floor is whether to approve the budget. And that last comment, at courtesy, I didn't cut it off, but it's well beyond the scope of whether to approve the budget. And we've had this discussion going for quite some time, so my plan, unless there's something new, is to move towards a vote. Does somebody have something they want to say that would be new? Mr. Van Slavin?
James Van Slavin, District 1, District 2, and District 3. Well, you have to see my porch. I see all of Brattleboro, so it feels like that. This is just a quick, short, 30-second suggestion. If there was a program for people that are having difficulty paying their taxes, like maybe taking $1.5 million and put it into solar panels. If we decrease their electric bill, can we use that decrease in electric bill in the savings to increase taxes, offset taxes? Is there a way where we could pretty much get rid of the electric bill in concept so that taxpayers can pay more for their taxes and keep the fire and police project going? It's just a creative type of thought. Thank you.
James. Ms. Joy, is there something that you wanted to add?
Only what he said.
Just trying to keep that caution in mind.
Okay. It was just that the reason there's been less calls is because the fire department is out there checking all these buildings to make sure that they're not going to burn down. Okay? That's 40% there, employment, 40% less fires. Tired.
Don't be sorry.
Oh, that's good.
Any further comments? All right, the motion on the floor is to approve replacement on the warning, presentation at representative town meeting, the fiscal year 2016 general fund budget with revenue and expenditures in the amount of $15,721,497, and to approve the fiscal year 2016 capital plan with expenditures of $1 million, revenue of $632,000 from loans, and a transfer from the general fund of $357,000. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That carries 4-1. Next matter on the agenda is unassigned fund balance. So, by way of introduction, we have million. Wait a second, I can find the exact number. I know where it is. We have $900,000 in change, right, John? $1,900,000 in change in available surplus money at this time. Right, available. Almost 2 million. That's correct.
I thought it was more than that.
$1.9 million.
I thought it was almost 2.
Well, it's 2.4 or 5, but from the 2.4 or 5, a bunch of it was committed to a number of projects. And after those deductions, there's $1.9 million. Find the exact number.
Okay.
All right, so the surplus is $2,535,979.
Yes.
We have $373,000 in an insurance obligation that wasn't reserved.
Yes.
And so we got to spend that money out of the surplus, and we took $200,000 from that surplus to offset the tax rate.
Yes.
Which leaves us with $1,962,900.
Right. Of which our target is.
Oh, yeah, I understand the
10% of our
target.
expenditures.
So we have $1,962,900 in the surplus. And the question is whether we're going to present an article to town meeting to spend any or all of that, and if so, for what? So, we have two proposals. And either way that we handle the proposal, that's not the right piece of paper. Holy moly. And either way, we're going to have to determine the amount of money to include in the article. So, the first question for discussion is, do you want to take any money from the unassigned fund balance? And if so, do you want to spend it to reduce the tax levy, or do you want to dedicate it to handle projects that would essentially be characterized as non-recurring, including, for example, the Green Street retaining wall, the Elliott Strait the Elliott Street Bridge, the Municipal Center Life Safety Improvements, and the Union Street Western Avenue intersection improvements. So,
Question.
sir,
I want that, but I don't want to spend it, I don't want any of it to go to the Green Street retaining wall. I want us to close that street and let it fall down.
yeah, well, that was a proposal that was made by somebody who approached us before.
Oh, but it's still here. So,
Yeah,
Anyway,
well.
that's my 2 cents.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
John?
could I hear from Peter on this? I mean, just as a...
I think that's a fine way to start.
It's up to Peter if you'd like to speak first, because it's definitely
Sure, he'd love to.
I'm sure he would. Shed a different light on my thinking of the unassigned reserve fund.
Okay. I'll briefly
Yes.
repeat what I said the last time. You all know what's coming, and many of the people in the room do. But I, on January 20th, made a very strong recommendation to the Select Board that they establish, at least as an informal policy, a commitment to utilize the unassigned fund balance only for non-recurring expenses in town government, because if we utilize it as a budget balancing tool from year to year, we've become reliant upon that, and we're actually living on an expenditures budget that is greater than what we can afford with our taxes. And there will inevitably come a year when we don't have a surplus, we can't use that tool the following year, and the pain in the community will be much greater than it would have been if we'd been not relying on that fund balance from year to year. So, that's not to say, though, that surpluses just keep happening and the savings account just keeps getting bigger, and that there aren't good, prudent uses that benefit the taxpayers in a way that doesn't put the town operating budget in that kind of a precarious position. In fact, that's a really important thing for us to do in situations like what we face with the 4 projects, with due respect to the retaining wall. You know, any one of these 4 is a fairly debatable matter on its own merits, but what each of the 4 represents is a situation where we don't have enough information at this moment to make a decision on exactly how to proceed, but these are going to be expensive and necessary capital improvements that should not be put off. Some of them cannot be put off until another fiscal year comes around and we're able to appropriate the funds in the normal manner. So my follow-up recommendation this evening to you would be, in this choice that you have before you of which manner you might use unassigned fund balance. I think you should, but I think you should choose the one that is involving the capital improvements. And we can talk about the amount of that if you decide you do want to move in that direction, but I think it's important that you preserve, if town meeting approves the recommendation, preserve the opportunity to address these capital project needs later in the year when we have enough information to make a well-informed decision. And the way to do that is to reserve a certain amount of the unassigned fund balance for that purpose.
And so that's where I was in a little bit of a gray area, because what's recurring and what's non-recurring,
Right.
and so that's where I just wanted to get a little bit more clarity on that. And thank you for that.
Sure.
I'm still not sure what's recurring, but maybe that could be debated.
I was just going to say, I would be in favor of using some of that money for projects. We do not have to determine specific projects tonight. We just need to determine what portion of the funds we would use.
That's correct.
Town attorney has indicated that we should identify some potential projects.
Okay.
And we have a list of 4 potential projects at this time.
Okay.
That would be part of that motion to give us authority to spend the sum not to exceed a certain amount up to, for expenses towards those 4 projects. If we needed to spend it for something different later on, we could seek separate authority from town meeting.
Okay.
But
So
that
I'm
would be the
comfortable
plan right now.
proceeding
Yeah.
And the recommended amount to keep in is 10%?
Right.
Is that right? So I would also be recommending that we stay with that guideline, at the very least, that we keep that 10% as a buffer.
Can I speak to that?
Sure, I mean, it's $375,000.
Exactly, yeah, that the available funds in order to meet that standard,
Yeah.
and maintain the 10% in the fund balance would be $375. That would be available for this purpose.
Okay.
I'd like to move then that we,
Wait, let me give you the exact language.
And we need a motion recorded. We need a motion recorded.
yeah.
We're doing the
Turn
motion.
on the motion recording.
Thanks, Dan.
To see if the town will approve a sum not to exceed $375,000 from the unassigned fund balance as of June 30th, 2014, to fund in whole or in part the following capital projects: Elliott Street Bridge, Municipal Center life safety improvements, and Union Street Western Avenue intersection improvements.
You left out one.
Well, the problem is
You can amend it.
right. Whether or not Green Street's going to be reopened, the wall has to be fixed because it's collapsing or going to collapse into Harmony Lot. So it's got to be fixed. one way or another. So I move to amend that motion to include the Green Street retaining wall.
I accept as a friendly amendment.
All right. So we're now voting, or we're now considering whether to include on the representative town meeting warning an article that would authorize the town to expend up to $375,000 from the unassigned fund balance for those 4 projects. Add into the table, anybody?
I agree with it, so I have nothing
Yeah.
to add.
I think it's a prudent way to deal with the surplus, and that's a good range of projects. I'm in favor. Anybody who's in attendance want to speak to this? Mr. Agabi.
The fixing the Green Street, what you seem to be saying, Mr. Gartenstein, is that regardless of what quality work is done, whether it's done merely to shore it up, to keep it from falling in, or whether it's repaired to handle heavy traffic, it's the same cost. There is no difference.
No, I didn't say that at all.
All right, so work has to be, it may have to be done at some point, but the issue is, I think, I agree with Mr. Scholes that putting that back into traffic use is something that can wait for a long, long time. My fear is that if you leave it in there, as you say, it allows the board to make that decision and then say, well, we said we were going to do it, to do that project to put the corner back into regular use as a vehicle, which is much more expensive.
Any further comment on this motion? Mr. Reed Savory.
George Reed Savory again, we got it.
Yep.
Just a question for the municipal center. In terms of long-range planning, are you considering any place besides the municipal center?
Can I answer that?
Sorry.
Mr. Reed Savory, it's on a table. It's on a table, but it's a historic building, can't be knocked down easily. It houses town operations. What's going to happen here is not all totally clear right now, but the fire code violations, they got to be fixed, and they got to be fixed soon. You know, like now, some of them. So we have some work to do. Ms. Turnus.
I'm confused. I agree with you as far as using that for that reason, but the $375,000, is that going to be split out through all of the 4 projects?
Let me just briefly say, we have about $1,960,000
Okay.
in available surplus money, just raw available. We have a guideline to keep 10%
Oh, so that's the 10%.
available. So after the 375, we would have 10% left.
Oh, okay.
And we're asking town meeting to give us the authority to spend the 375 in our discretion
Okay.
after full public discussion, after recommendations by the administration and discussion and decision by the select board on any one of those 4 projects.
May I add to that, though, that
Yeah.
the sum of $375,000 is not nearly sufficient to do all 4.
Right,
So-
that's
so
pretty
there'll
obvious,
be
yeah.
a decision-making process to decide where the priorities are and how much to spend on one or more of those 4 projects.
Okay, but we can do 4 if we need to, or no?
Not with the $375,000.
Oh, all right. No, okay.
Ms. Baboulas?
Dora Bubalis, District 3. Can we just get a better explanation about what non-recurring expenses are? Because you were very eloquent, Mr. Elwell, at the last meeting, and I very much appreciated what you said. What I'm hearing about these projects, these are regular capital infrastructure projects. These are not non-recurring expenses. These are part of our regular maintenance of things that we have to do. So I would like to get a better explanation from the board as to what we mean by non-recurring expenses, because these are not non-recurring expenses.
Peter?
Yeah. I believe that they are non-recurring expenses, but here's why I believe that. And once I've said it, you might agree or you might disagree, but it's the way that capital expenses are recurring is when we have a plan and it requires a certain amount of funding each year. So for instance, in replacement of vehicles, if we know that we're going to replace a certain type of vehicle, 2 or 3 of them every year, then the purchase of 3 such vehicles in a given year isn't a non-recurring expense, even though that vehicle is a capital item and we're going to own it for a while, because we're buying 3 every year. So that's a recurring expense. That's part of the continuing regular expenses of town government. And that can be with some very large expensive items when they do recur frequently. But the kinds of things that are on this list are once in a generation or less often types of expenses. Now, an argument could be made within this building that because of the age and because of the other things that are going to need to be done over time, if we do stay here and keep it functional and safe and freshen it up to some degree, that there's a lot of cost related to this building that is going to recur. But the particular expenses we face at this moment are to come into compliance in a situation where we're not in compliance. So the urgency of that puts it on this list. The other items are really non-recurring in the sense that once this piece of work is done, we don't go back to those sites to do anything similar for a very long time, decades.
Any further discussion about the motion on the floor to approve an article to town meeting to authorize the town to appropriate some not to exceed $375 from the fund balance for those various capital projects? Hearing no discussion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Next item on the agenda is the local option sales tax. There's been a request to put an inquiry about a local option sales tax either on the ballot or the town meeting agenda, or both. And I will defer to whoever wants to speak to that request. Mr. Scholes?
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, and Ms. O'Connor's got a disclosure to make.
Yeah, full disclosure, I work for the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber has taken a public position against the local option sales tax. I've gone back and forth thinking about this. And what I think I need to do, even though I fully believe I can make a decision outside of my job, I'm going to recuse myself from it. But I would ask in our charter it allows for a person on a board or committee who has recused themselves because of a conflict of interest to take part in the discussion if a majority of the fellow board members would allow them to. So if you would allow me to take part in the discussion, I would
All righty
appreciate
then.
it.
All those in favor of allowing Ms. O'Connor to participate in the discussion, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? That carries 4-0. So, Mr. Scholes.
I just want to point out that I don't think that, I think that's the right thing to do. I don't think that it would make, I think what you think is what you think, and it's not going to be affected by that. I suggested that we put this on the agenda again because, well, for a number of reasons, but one of them is because when we went to visit the governor last year to ask him to take action to move a bill through the legislature that was going to deal with the particular inequities of the tax system toward regional economic hubs like Brattleboro, where we have no means to tax people who use our services, who walk on the streets that we remove the snow from, or who use the toilets when they go to work or when they go to their businesses, or who visit their doctors, or any of the other things that they do here, who live in surrounding towns. We pay for all of those services, and there's no way to tax them. And the governor pointed out that, well, actually, he wasn't going to support the bill because 10 years ago, 11 years now, the legislature passed the local option sales tax, and that was our remedy. Of course, previous to that, at the same meeting, he thanked us for not passing it. But so that's the remedy that we have. And I think that, as with everything else having to do with the police fire project, things are constantly changing. There's constantly new information coming in. Realities change, life changes for people. And I think it's just as we need to keep bringing the issue of the police fire project, the nature of it, the cost of it, before the public, we need to keep bringing the financial aspects of it, the revenue aspects of it before the public. And I know there are plenty of people here who are going to speak against it, and for obviously a lot of good reasons, but I think that ultimately it's not for us to decide whether this tax happens or not. It's for the representatives. That's the system, the structure that we have in place. It's for the representatives to decide whether this tax is approved or not. And I think it's our job to provide that opportunity. I think a townwide vote and a vote at town meeting are the right way to proceed with that particular question.
Anybody else on the board?
I'll go.
All right, Tom.
I want to say that I strongly agree with David Scholes that it needs to be put to the town. I also have been sitting with pretty organized, articulate outpouring of concern from the merchants. And what I've come up with is when I go up and down Main Street, I can't imagine where anybody could find the caliber, the quality, the uniqueness of so many of the contents of those shops. So I think there's a lot of fear about what the passage of that tax option would do to the merchants, and I care very much. I think we would be shooting ourselves in the foot to do anything that would make it more difficult to be a business owner in this town. But I believe that a lot of what has prevented us from passing this potential, one of very few potential revenue streams, is fear. Because the quality of the goods in this community are stellar, and they're hard to find. And I'm over in the border in New Hampshire a lot. We all are. There is just not the same kind of goods for the most part. So I guess I'm just saying, I think we might want to consider shifting our mindset on that.
I'm going to go next. I'm going to vote against putting this on the ballot and on the warning for timing-related issues. Just as with the inclusion of the $140,000 in the budget to begin paying interest on a project that hasn't been approved. I don't think that this is the time to be bringing this issue back up, because we're not going back to the voters with a clear proposal. I don't know what the plan is for police fire at this point, and I don't see how we could be asking for money to build it, and I don't see how we can be asking for taxes to support building it until we know what it is and we're having a full discussion. So I'm going to vote against it. Okay?
Go.
First of all, thank you for letting me talk. I'll just if I was going to be voting, I was going to be voting against this, partly for what David said, because I voted against the budget because I didn't like the 140 in it. But there is the other problem that I see with it, it is the impact that it's going to have on our retailers. And I think there's a sense that this tax will only be paid by out-of-staters who come in and shop. That is just, it's not true. Everybody here every day, when you buy your shampoo or whatever, if you go downtown, you're going to pay that tax. I think it's also important to remember that we are on the border of New Hampshire. And it's not just it's a 1% increase with New Hampshire, a difference with New Hampshire. It's not. It would be a 7% increase with New Hampshire, not a 1% increase. I also think, there was a reference into the letter that we received in our packet, it's not only the retailers that this is an issue with, this is an issue with a lot of property owners. There's a lot of retail space, especially if you go down Main Street, that is not filled. And we need those property owners to be able to attract retailers to be in those buildings. I mean, we need property values to be high, which means we need businesses in those empty retail spaces. And I think that's sort of been lost, and I think that was well mentioned in the letter we received. I also think the one thing we don't talk about, and we didn't talk about it in the budget discussion, and this is not the place to have a long-term discussion about it, but Vermont Yankee Nuclear Power Plant turned the switch off at the end of 2014. At the end of 2014, there were 550 people that worked at that plant who made, six figures. A lot of them made six figures. Today, there are 312 people working at that plant. So we lost more than 200 people in the last couple of weeks. This time next year, there'll be 100 and something. In 5 years, there'll be less than 50. And I think that we can't forget the impact of the disposable income that we're going to be losing. That's just alone, just the disposable income that we're going to be losing. So, my opinion, if I could vote, I'd be voting no. And I really think it's not just, the retailers can, suck it up. We can't say that. And it's not just a 1% increase versus New Hampshire. It's a 7% increase versus New Hampshire. So that's my little pitch.
John?
I have been dead set against the 1% for a long time. But what has changed my mind, and I'm going to vote for this, to have it go to town meeting, because of what David Scholes said, and because of what Mr. Davis said. I don't think it's our choice to make. I think it has to go to representative town meeting again. And again, Andy, you were very eloquent about it, and I read your letter on Brattleboro, and I think you are correct, that it has to be looked at again. And so that's why, and I'm not going to get into the big, because it is a very hard question. But I think it's up to the reps to discuss this and either put it to rest or, I don't know if any of these things ever get put to rest, because in this town we just keep bringing it up and. That's one thing that bothers me a little bit, is that if you don't get your way, you just keep bringing it up and keep bringing it up until it goes your way. And I don't know if it's in frustration that people vote for it or whatever, but so I'm a little concerned about that aspect of it. But when David was explaining his side of it, and again with Andy, I just think it should go before the reps.
We're ready for a motion as to the town meeting ballot.
I move we add the following article to the town meeting warning for a non-binding advisory vote on March 4th, 2014. Oh, no, this is
You're
the
reading
old
from
one,
last
sorry.
year. Here you go.
That's last year's. To see if, shall the voters of the town of Brattleboro recommend the adoption of a 1% local option sales tax to the members of representative town meeting? This article is advisory only and shall be acted upon by all the voters of the town by Australian ballot.
So that motion is to include that language as read on the Australian ballot for March 3rd. There will be a separate motion and vote after to consider whether it's going to be included on the warning on March 21st. All right, so the motion on the floor is to include a Australian ballot article that's advisory only about imposition of 1% local option sales tax. Dora?
Dora Bublis, District 3. I continue to be opposed to the idea of a local option tax for multiple reasons. First, it's not really a healthy retail environment right now. Nationwide, it's not a healthy retail environment for the local businesses because they're really getting pummeled by the internet. I spend a lot of time going down to Northampton, and just in the last couple of months, 3 businesses, one really large one, are closing. And some of them are saying they're still profitable businesses, but people are retiring and they're going away, and they're not necessarily being replaced by other businesses. I was over at Pisgah this afternoon snowshoeing, and I was driving back, and I was noticing the changes in Chesterfield, which I notice every day when I go through there, every couple of weeks. They're chomping at the bit to get some of our business over there across the river, and they've gotten some of it. And as Kate was saying about the idea of sort of empty retail space, the question you have to weigh is how much you lose in tax revenue on one side versus how much you gain in tax revenue on another side. So the question is, if we're losing businesses, if we're not gaining businesses, because it's a certain kind of business that's affected by this. It's not everything. Are you losing more than you're gaining? And I don't, I think that when you're a border town and you're right next to a state that doesn't have any taxes, your climate and for the retail environment of people who are interested in opening up a business, they're just going to look at it and they're going to weigh all of the pros and cons, and they're going to say, not really a good idea. And we really need that healthy downtown environment with lots of business and lots of activity in order to bring people into this community. So,
Thank you, Ms. Baboulas. I'm going to note that the question for decision by the board is whether to put this on the Australian ballot, not whether or not to adopt the 1% local option sales tax. So while I understand the two are related, I'm going to ask people please to limit their comments to the greatest extent possible, because all we're deciding tonight is whether to put it on the Australian ballot and whether to put it to town meeting again. So, and Mr. Davis, you already spoke to it in your last comment, so I'm going to pass you over right now, even though I like you, Mr. Stevens.
Thank you for giving me a chance. Bob Stevens, District 2. I'm not exactly sure, it's hard to talk. Yeah, I'll do the best I can.
Doing the best I can to try to keep us on track.
I was sort of thinking about what perspective I might be able to offer maybe to the community and to this board about this issue. And as someone who is on the SevEds board and on the BDCC board and has spent years now trying to understand the economy locally and then is involved in some real estate property downtown, like to perhaps give you my perspective on what I understand our economy is doing, and specifically how that relates to our retail downtown. And first of all, as most of you probably know, our economy has been flatlined for about 10 years. Now, we've been 6, 7 years in a great recession. Maybe it's going to start improving, but now we're trying to ride on the backs of VY going out. It's not exactly a situation, or I should say it's a situation where it needs help. We need to be doing things that are bumping our economy along, because the long-term solution to your financing problem is to see an increase in our grand list. We need to figure out how to see the grand list increase. And my question to you, and putting this on the agenda, or even enacting this, what is this doing to increase the grand list, or is this in fact doing something to decrease the grand list? And to that point, I would say that if you look at retailers that have gone out in our downtown recently, and there's some turnover, obviously, none of those stores have sold. What that means is that those businesses are not profitable enough to have a market for anybody to buy them. That means that these businesses are mom and pop stores that barely cover their way of life to be there. They're not successful. They're sort of plugging along. They're great. Don't get me wrong. I'm very optimistic. I love downtown. I love our merchants downtown. They're there, though, for many reasons as a way of life. And I think we need to be very careful about what incentives we put out there. And I'll tell you from our perspective, we have the Brooks House downtown. We have 4 retail spaces right now that are empty. We don't have a long line of people standing up to rent those spaces. There is really little to no market for retail in our town. We're doing what we can to drive that, but ultimately, if we can't fill that from people who feel they can be successful here, we're going to have to lower our rents. And when we lower our rents, your assessors are going to lower our appraised value. Your grand list is going to go down, not up. So again, I would be very careful about thinking, well, it's just a little more. People can pay it. It's not much. You're right. Throw 10 cents into the bucket. It doesn't seem like much, but you have to think, or at least the way I think about this, is that you've got an economy that is flat right now, and you can either try to tip it to kind of increase and do better, or you can start doing things that tip it to go down. And I think you're really right at the edge. It's not an economy that's climbing. We're going to take a little more off the edge. We're flat. So think very hard about whether this makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
In between each comment, I'm going to caution that all we're talking about is whether it should go on the ballot or not. And unless somebody's mind is changing, it looks like the board members have said 3-1 it's going on the ballot and on town meeting morning. Ms. Wright?
I'd like it to be on the ballot. I'd like it to go to the voters.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Davis?
Put it on the ballot.
I can't see who's in the back there. Ms. Turnus?
I guess I have different.
You should use the mic. I'm sorry about that. The mic is for the TV.
I know, right?
I know.
I know you know.
I guess I kind of have to step in where John just said, and I don't always agree with John, but it's...
You've never agreed with me.
You're right. But, how many... It's like, how many times does this have to go on, and how many times do we have to vote it down? Is this going to be it? Because we have voted down this 1% sales tax, twice already, so this is number 3. So, let it die after this.
I think we voted it down 3 times at town meeting already.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I don't mean to cut off discussion, it's just that Kurt?
I think it was voted down twice by the RTM. It was the resolution for the people was favorable, but that was really kind of a messed up resolution because it had the note about decreasing the costs of the police fire project, which was kind of shaky language. But it was voted once up and twice down.
I think I inquired of the town clerk, and we had it 3 times at town meeting, and that's what the reformer had reported, and I think they were correct. But that's okay. Is there any further discussion about this item? All right, so the motion on the table is to see if the following article will be added to the town meeting ballot. Shall the voters of the town of Brattleboro recommend the adoption of 1% local option sales tax and members of the representative town meeting? This article is advisory only and shall be acted upon by all voters of the town by Australian ballot.
Before you vote, can I ask one thing?
Yes, sir.
If, because there's two articles here, am I correct?
No, we're voting on one to be put on the Australian ballot right now.
Okay, but what if I don't agree with that, then I want to go with the other one? I mean, are we also going to?
We're voting, Dave is definitely going to move next to put it on town meeting warning, I bet.
Oh, yeah.
Oh. Oh, I know it is, but I just wanted to make sure that there was another
They're both
option.
going to happen. Yeah. You'll get your chance. All right. All those in favor of putting it on an Australian ballot, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All those abstaining or recusing themselves. Okay, so that carries 3-1 with one recusal. Then, do we have another motion?
Sure. See if it's not, oh, you want to read it, or is that?
To add the following article to the town meeting warning.
To see if the town will assess a 1% local option sales tax in accordance with 24 VSA Section 138.
All right, we have a motion on the floor to see if we'll have an article in town meeting warning about the local option sales tax. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of adding an article to the town meeting warning as follows, to see if the town will assess a 1% local option sales tax in accordance with 24 VSA Section 138, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Anybody recusing themselves? Okay, that carries 3-1 with one recusal. All right, the next matter on the agenda is a request for a town meeting article about the 24/7 roll-off bins. I believe that's also been suggested by Mr. Scholes, so we'll hand it over to you. Here it is.
I'm looking for the one that I wrote the notes on. Okay.
I don't think he's making the motion. You're making the motion. Tell us when you're making the motion.
I'll make the motion.
Right away? All right.
To see if the voters of the town of Brattleboro will recommend to the select board to keep and maintain the recycling dumpsters, also known as 24/7 bins and roll-off containers, at the Fairground Road at a cost of approximately $60,000. This article is advisory only and shall be acted upon by all voters of the town by Australian ballot.
Would it be fair to say that your motion is to place that article on the Australian ballot on March 3rd?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I speak to it?
Please, go for it.
Yeah, this, I would like the voters to vote on this article because if Brattleboro does not want the roll-off service, that would have a very significant and adverse effect on the Waste Management District's ability to provide roll-off containers in other towns. And so it's important to know that the voters don't want it if they don't want it. For us to try and decide that, or for the town representatives to try and decide that based on whatever information they might have is much more difficult. It'd be much easier if we hear from the town. If we do want it, it will be included. If we do want this facility and we want this opportunity, which was pointed out is a second opportunity to recycle because we have curbside recycling across the town. If we do want this facility, it will be included in the conversation that the Wyndham Solid Waste Management District Board will be having about structural changes in the assessment system. So the $60,000 is approximately what we're paying for that service now. That may or may not change if we can continue to want the services. But the Waste Management Board will be talking about the assessment and whether fees for service is better than a blanket assessment. And all of that is up for discussion. But if Brattleboro votes that we don't want them, period, then it changes the conversation significantly. So I want to make sure that that as the representative of the town on the Waste Management Board, I know what the will of the town is as far as those containers and that recycling site is concerned.
We'll hear from people in the audience. Anybody on the board want to speak to it? Yeah? Tom? Kate?
Well, I think I'm not the only person that's concerned that this is like really too vague. And I don't think it gives the context. I mean, obviously, if you look at that and you go up to the recycling bin, you're going to go, of course I want those dumpsters there. And it doesn't really explain to the person who's voting why we're asking the question. Like, we're not just asking the question to be nice because we want their opinion. Not to say we don't want people's opinion, but it's not just a throw-on article, which it appears to be how it's written, and I think that's my concern. And so I would vote no against it as it's written, because I don't think it gets to the heart. It doesn't answer the question that we know we want answered. You know what I mean? Like, we know the backstory, and it's not described in the language what the backstory is. So that's what I'm concerned about.
I agree with Kate. This inquiry is part of a much broader discussion that we've had about whether the Wyndham Solid Waste Management District is treating the town of Brattleboro fairly and proportionately in its assessments of costs for solid waste management for the district as a whole. I said this before, and I'll say it again, that as far as I understand it, we're the only town that provides recyclables pickup funded through municipal taxes for its residents, for people who live in buildings 4 dwelling units or less. And so the taxpayers of the town, the residential taxpayers in units 4 dwelling units and less, wind up paying for the cost of recycling, both through municipal taxes and through the assessment to the district. And so I think really the question is, should the town's residential property owners be charged twice through property taxes for the costs of collecting recyclables in Brattleboro, by including in the budget both, one, a charge paid to a commercial hauler to cover the costs of curbside recyclables pickup for residences with up to and including 4 dwelling units, and 2, an assessment paid to Wyndham Solid Waste Management District to pay a share of all costs to maintain recycling roll-offs in all towns throughout the district, allocated on a per capita basis on all residents in the district, without regard to whether those residents already pay for recyclables pickup through their municipal taxes. That's the question. And unless we pose the question that way, we're just asking for an answer to an irrelevant question. I also would say that we heard presentation from the Solid Waste Management District that we were deferring a decision on going from dual stream to single stream, and we were deferring other decisions about the management of the district to see how Act 148 rolls out. And if there's going to be a wholesale change in the way we're dealing statewide with recyclables and solid waste pickup, to ask the question phrased as you've asked it at this point, I don't think is a fair assessment of public opinion on the topic, and fairly will inform anything that we do. So I'm against the proposal. I would actually move to amend it to what I just proposed, and then I would vote against it too, because I don't think it belongs on the ballot. John?
As much as I would love to agree with you on this one, David, I can't in its present form, and we've had this discussion, and and I'm looking for a real restructure of the district, and again, I think it might be a little bit vague. And again, I would love to support this because you supported me, but this one is a little. I'm having a hard time with it, and I've read it, and I just tried to, to see if I could wrap my head around it in this form, and I'm having just a little bit of a hard time with it. So I'm still up in the air a little bit on it, but I may go that way. I hate to, I really do, because I think it should.
You know what the question is, yeah.
Yeah.
Donald?
I agree.
No! Jesus! Oh, David.
Well, as is often the case, when I meet with this group, I learn things. What I'd like to clarify is that what I need to know is whether the town, the people of the town are using this facility and want to retain this facility. Or is it being used by people coming by from other areas or from people that have other options, but they just don't get around to putting it out so they come over and drop it off, and it's convenient.
I think there's a bigger picture here, too.
And it also, it has a significant impact on how much recycling gets to the recycling stream at the Waste Management District, which has to do with how much revenue gets generated. It's a very complex picture, and if people don't want it or don't use it, and we're providing this service for people outside of town, and it is a duplicate service, so we are paying twice for the same thing, then I would like to know that. And that's not going to change the conversation at the Waste Management District about restructuring and about how it's going to work. And it might not, even if it goes to fee for service, even though ours are closer to the dump or to the transfer station, ours go there many more times than the ones from Putney or Dumbarton or somewhere else that's paying $35,000 instead of $60,000. So we may not save a penny on it. What I want to know is, do we need that service? And I don't know how else to get to it except to ask people to vote whether they want it or not.
I'm going to suggest that this, among many other issues, is on the new town manager's plate. And making sure that the way in which we interact with the Wyndham Solid Waste Management District is fair to the town is something that I've asked the new town manager to look at. It's not something he's going to be able to get to right away because there's a lot of other things. But if a part of that question is whether we should keep the roll-offs there, then there must be a way to gather the answer to your question in some other way than putting it on the ballot. That's what I would ask for him to do in the long term. So I think he knows it's a question, but it's not really something that we've gotten to yet because there's a lot of
I'll withdraw the motion so to waste more time on it.
Oh,
or spend any more time.
Okay. Well,
so next.
Very good. All right. The next item on the agenda is the representative town meeting article for the Ad Hoc Futures Committee. And I will read the motion as it's previously been presented. To add an article to the town meeting warning as follows. To see if the town will vote to establish a committee of representative town meeting. Do I need to say it again?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
All right, reading it again. So the pending motion is to see whether an article will be added to the town meeting warning as follows. To see if the town will vote to establish a committee of representative town meeting to be known as a committee of the future. So that's the motion that's been on the table. It's been discussed on the 6th and the 20th, and it's on for discussion again tonight. Anybody from the board? Well, then I'll speak to it. All right, unless,
I will.
All right, go for it.
You want to go last or you want to?
Doesn't matter.
Okay. Well, after reading through the documentation, and there's a discussion document that came in our binder, which I think probably all of you don't have, and it's probably in line if you wanted to see it. There's a discussion of this whole issue and pointing out that the town meeting asked for a report, and the members from a committee, the members of that committee are asking to have a formal committee, have the town meeting discuss the creation of a formal committee, decide the creation of a formal committee. And I think rather than going through the step-by-step procedure of having it be on the old business this year, which means no action can come of it, and then have to wait until next year to take a vote on whether to have a committee of the future, I think that, well, as it says in here, as a matter of expediency, placing it on the 2015 article would allow the merits of the debate to proceed and allow for the possible establishment of such a commission. And I don't see a reason to make it, to be more formal in terms of going through the actually designated steps when we have the opportunity to just say, let's just deal with it. The town meeting last year said they wanted to hear about this, let them hear about it, and I don't see a reason to put the decision on creating a commission off for a month. We got a communication from the planning department about conflicts with statute, with the role of the planning department. There are all kinds of questions that are going to revolve around this. I don't think it's our job to go through all those questions now and decide whether to do this. I think we should put it in front of the town meeting and let the town meeting decide and avoid further confusion. Get the information gathered and get it presented at town meeting.
Can I ask a question? And I read the memo, but I just need to clarify if I got it. I may have totally misunderstood this whole thing. Town meeting asked for a report. What's in front of us today is to ask to put forward to town meeting, putting together a permanent committee.
An article to that
right,
effect,
for a
yes.
permanent committee. Is there, and again, I apologize if this was spelled out, I don't understand. If this is just, if it's put on under old business, a report, and town meeting reps decide, hey, we've listened to the report and we want to form a committee, how does that all work?
Then we would, through a special town meeting, have an article as to formally establishing that committee. To have it be an ongoing, binding, formal committee. By the charter, and I think it's the addendum B or C, town meeting has the ability to create committees. And this is where, from the standpoint of the standing, binding, long-term committees should be done formally. In the past, we've had committees under other business that were formed that report back the next year on a particular issue, but they don't go any further than that. So that's usually taken up under other business as simply a report. But what my memo points out is that there are two ways for an article to get on to a town meeting warning. One is by petition, that's not before us. The second is by the select board. So that's the only, if you put it on, then it would be a formal article as to whether to establish it. It can be then voted on. If you do that, the merits of the issue will be voted upon at representative town meeting, and the chips fall where they may at that point.
John?
So, while I agree with David Skoll's assessment of this, I am on the fence, Spoon. I really am on this, because I don't know, and I agree that it should go, but I'm really confused about the wording, and so that's, and the legality of it, the process of this. So, and I've read it. I've read all the statements from everybody, and I'm still really confused on it. And I'll be the first one to admit it. I'm confused on this, on which way to go on this. Where I'd like to, and I'm just, I'll be the first one to admit I get confused on something like this. So I'm still trying to get all the answers.
I'm going to recognize myself next.
Good.
The charter establishes a mechanism by which a citizen can get an item on the town meeting warning. And it's Ms. Baboulas who's pointed out on many occasions when we were on the board together that part of the reason for the charter changes in 2011 was to make sure that the select board didn't have to get in the middle of policy decisions on an annual basis, because annually people come up with their own policy ideas and ideas about what they think should be better governance, and regularly people come and say, well, what about this? Let's put this on the warning. Let's put that on the warning. It comes up in these meetings. They come up in other business at town meeting. And so there is a clear structure in the charter for gathering signatures to put something on town meeting warning by petition. And I don't really think that mechanism is so onerous. In fact, Mr. Dimes has gone out with Brattleboro Common Sense and gathered petitions to put things on the ballot regularly, and it's the same exact procedure to put it on town meeting warning. He went and he collected signatures to get a referendum on the budget last year, and it wasn't so onerous, it was 50 town meeting members. And he went and he collected 377 signatures to put 3 articles for charter changes on a ballot. Now, Mr. Agave could have done that last year. If he wanted to establish a new town meeting committee, he could have collected signatures and had an article on the town meeting warning last year. And that would have been following the procedure, and it would have been a binding article. But that didn't happen last year. What happened last year is that in other businesses, people were walking out the room after a really difficult meeting. We had a discussion about whether to form an ad hoc futures committee, and there wasn't a lot of discussion, as I recall. And the article that was adopted under other business was to form an ad hoc futures committee and to hear a report back in 2015. Now, we have a finance committee. Well, we used to have a finance committee because there's nobody on the finance committee this year. So there ain't no finance committee this year. But, you know, we had a standing finance committee of town meeting, and the town meeting moderator would appoint members, and they would present their report. And they didn't have a separate item on the agenda, present their report. It would be circulated at town meeting, and then people would stand up to speak to it. Now, I went back in an effort really to investigate what the Futures Committee's been doing. And I went online, you know, to look at the meeting minutes and to see what's been approved. And I see that there's probably been 6 or 8 meetings of the Futures Committee since it was formed in mid-2014. And I see that in September of 2014, there was discussion of a town meeting or a town meeting Futures Committee mission statement, but the mission statement has never been approved. There were meetings in October and November, and no mission statement was ever formally approved by the Futures Committee, and there hasn't been a Futures Committee meeting since November. And there's never been a recommendation by the Futures Committee to, not an open meeting that I'm aware of, and we do function under open meeting rules, you know. There's never been a formal request by the committee to go on the budget, on the warning, to form a permanent committee. So all I'm seeing here is, and with all due respect for Mr. Agave, because, you know, he thinks that this is a good way to generate discussion and to inform what's going on in the town, but I don't see that any formal process has been followed. So same as the last one. If we were going to do anything about this, I would think we would put an article on the agenda to say to hear the report of the Ad Hoc Futures Committee. But I don't even see why we need it on the agenda. So that's where I'm at.
Okay. John? Just to follow up. I consider Mr. Agave to probably be one of the foremost experts on our charter. You have read it up and down. You have redesigned it. And so this is where I'm having a hard time, because I'm still trying to figure out where we're missing something here, where we're missing what you're asking for, and where this misinterpretation is coming from. So
And I'm going to recognize Spoon, but before I do that, I'm just going to make sure, because there's 5 of us at the table. Donna, did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I'll speak briefly. There is something about the petition signing, I think, that formalizes a process. It feels to me like creating a committee that could potentially have at least some interesting boundary issues, if not occasional conflicts, is a serious matter. And the formality of the process as it exists in the charter, I think, is one that ensures a fair process. At the same time, I think that Mr. Agave is a really interesting thinker and very dedicated to following his vision for a true democratic process. And so I'm interested in hearing what you have to say, even about why you might have opted not to go the petition route and bring that before us. So yeah, I have some concerns. I haven't decided where I land on this vote.
Spoon, you ready?
Yep. Spoon of garbage. I am surprised, but I hadn't known when the ad hoc committee passed the opening part that you will see this lines where everything from on the page where it says this is what the ad hoc committee agreed upon while I was on vacation. I got back from vacation and they said, here's the statement we agreed on as a committee. Actually became a little bit of an issue because I wasn't altogether happy with it, and I kept sort of trying to change it and not recognize it. But they stuck to it and they said, this is what we agreed on. And so there it is. And I never went back to look at minutes to see whether they recorded that vote. So maybe they haven't. But all of them said this is what they agreed on. The charter says in the addendum, as the town attorney points out, addendum B, that the representative town meeting has the power to form committees from time to time as it wishes. There is nothing that I know of, correct, which says how the charter would go about that. It doesn't. Most expository writing usually puts its main point in the first sentence. And I did that when I wrote in the motion last year. The first sentence was to establish an ad hoc committee of representative town meeting for the purpose of bringing forth a proposal for the establishment of a, quote, futures commission. It's in quotes because there was no real name for it then. It seemed pretty clear, the purpose of bringing forth a proposal for the establishment. It was clear to me, and it seemed to everybody in there, that what they would get would be a proposal to establish it. And that would mean they would have to vote on it. Now, technically, it doesn't say that for the purpose of bringing forth a vote on the establishment. So, you have that right, Mr. Guggenstein. If you read on further in the report on that thing, it kind of tries to flesh out for people how that would happen, and it said that there would be a report written. So you could fall back on that and say, yes, that was really the intent. I don't think anybody in that room then thought so, but you could. Supposing it had said of bringing forth a proposal to vote for the establishment of a futures commission. They would have said, representative town meeting said, we want a proposal to vote on this. Would you have the power to deny that? That's the legal. That's what you're talking about, the legal. And in other words, and that was that whole issue of ultimate power. Even if representative town meeting said it wanted to vote on something at its next meeting, could you deny it? Could they not be permitted to put something on their own agenda? And perhaps, I mean, there may not be, and probably is no case law on that in the state, because we are the only town that has a representative town meeting, and this has never come up before. So there wouldn't be, I assume, there probably wouldn't be anything to refer to. It would have to go through his higher court as necessary to figure that out. But I go back again where I say the intention was to bring forth a proposal to establish the committee. Supposing, again, if you want a thought experiment, there was no motion at all made. And I just stepped forward and said, would you place this on the ballot, the same motion that you're looking at, to have a vote on it? Now, it is town business. What has generally been established in case law is that select boards have the power to not put something on the agenda, and it usually lists some criteria like it is something that is not germane to town business or may be frivolous. A little bit of that language was removed in our charter amendments in other matters, but that has been the standards. Now, I don't believe that the formation of a future committee, of a committee of the future, is either not town business or at all the least bit frivolous. So the usual standards for a select board rejecting something aren't there. By what standards are you rejecting it, if you choose to do so? It is town business. It is not frivolous. It is important. You all recognize that creating the dialogue that this committee would intend to do is important work. You know, if I'm on it, I'm going to make it interesting. I'm going to raise important questions, and I'm not going to raise things that have already been raised in a town plan. I'm not interested in just repeating what's already there. It's a committee that would study the fabric of this community to try and understand why people don't participate much anymore. You know, what are the long-term economic issues 20, 30 years, and what's our future like? And how do we begin to think about responding to it? What's the strength of our political system? What are its strengths? What are its weaknesses? These are not things that a planning commission is expected to or ever has discussed. There needs to be another forum. Now, you may choose to not put this on the ballot. Maybe someone would then stand up and make a resolution at the end of the meeting. Shall the members, like to see a futures committee? And they might say yes. Now where are we? Or maybe that wouldn't happen and just a group of people in Brattleboro would just get together and start doing it. The same work, except that now they would not be under open meeting laws or anything like that. They could just do their work however they wish to. And there are merits on that. But my preference is to in some way be under the auspices or expectations and to receive some kind of at least a show of support from the town. And that's the reason it's there, because I wanted, and I do want, town meeting itself to say, this is what we want. And what will happen if it's on the ballot, then somewhat on the agenda, then someone will stand up and will speak to it, and there will be a debate, and there'll be a vote. If not, if it's not on the ballot, then perhaps at the end of the meeting, someone will stand up, make a resolution, speak to it, there will be a debate, and there will be a vote. And, or maybe none of those things will happen, and a committee will just meet on its own and do it. Or maybe nothing at all. Maybe it will turn out that there aren't enough people in this town to even want to do that at all, given the other levels of participation that we're experiencing. It's one of my fears that in fact there just won't be people who even want to ask these questions or look at them. I hope not. In any case, that's my case.
Any further questions or comments or inquiry from the board?
Can I just
Kate?
ask you were talking about when you looked at the minutes online, and was there anything that the committee voted on that said that this is what anybody wanted?
All right, so
I'm just clarifying.
I have here the September 10, 2014 meeting minutes from the Ad Hoc Futures Committee. This would appear to be the meeting that Spoon said he was on vacation because his name ain't on the list. Although it's not clear to me that everybody who's listed here is on the committee. It's got a preamble and proposal. And then it says at the end, the Ad Hoc Futures Committee then decided on an agenda for our next meeting to come to a final vote on the preceding language to begin a discussion of structural constraints and recommendations.
And that's it.
That's what it says. And then there was a 10-8 meeting and 11-5 meeting where, from what I could tell from the minutes, it wasn't discussed in either of those forms. So, I mean, if the committee had met and said, we want to, as a committee, a request that the select board put this on an agenda, that'd be one thing. I might have a different position.
Right.
Another thought.
Dave?
I think the representative town meeting has dealt with a lot of complex issues, a lot of complex questions, and I think that it's a really effective structure to talk about and get all the information out to make decisions on complex questions. And I think that the best way to resolve this is to have the town meeting get all of the information, the legal questions, I can't think of the right word, jurisdictional questions about between the planning department and what the committee might be doing, all aspects of it, to get it out of the table and let the town representatives decide whether we need or want or require a future commission. And to just put on the warning and let the structure that has been put in place to make these decisions make the decision.
I'm in favor of that as well at this point.
Anybody else on the board have anything to say?
Yeah, I'm based on what Bob, my first question to him, which was, it can be taken up at town meeting, they can discuss it, and then town meeting can say, yes, we want to do a futures committee, and then we move forward from there, based on what you just said about really being no actual documentation that the futures committee really, there's nothing that says at a futures committee meeting, there was a decision that we want to make it a full committee. I would rather have it just, instead of just speeding forward and putting it on saying there's going to be a futures committee, I would rather have town meeting talk about it, listen to the report of the futures committee, and if the futures committee says our recommendation is to form a permanent futures committee, I would rather then go from there, because I think we're stepping, since we don't have any record of the ad hoc futures committee saying we want a futures committee, I think we need to have town meeting really, really think about it, and if at the end of the discussion they decide, we want to put a futures committee together, then we go the next step. And I know it's subtle, it's sort of the same thing, but I think I would rather have people really discuss it. If we're going to discuss it, I think, and I know, again, it's really, really subtle, but I would rather town meeting sort of come to the conclusion after a discussion that, yes, that's the route we want to go, and then we take another step. And again, I know it's really, really subtle, and probably people can't figure out what I'm saying, but I just think because I'm uncomfortable because we don't have any documentation from the Futures Committee at any meeting that this is what they want to do.
John?
I think it's so subtle that I think we're making a mountain out of a molehill. And I'm going to vote in favor of this and let the reps battle it out and see what they come up with. So,
Anybody who's in attendance have anything they want to say? Ms. Joy, you have to go to the mic.
I would like to ask Mr. Fisher, again, what he thinks at this point.
Well, there's a difference too as far as whether something should be on an agenda and whether legally it has to be. My memo here goes to the legal issue of how does an article get onto the town meeting warning? And there are two ways to do that. One is by petition, and one is by a vote of this body, the select board. So it's up to the select board to do that, and there's no duty for them to do it absent a petition. So whether it should go on or not, that is a policy decision that this board is going to make tonight. And then based on that, it will be discussed at town meeting, regardless of whether it is a formal article on whether or not to create a Futures Commission. If it goes on as a formal article, that will be the issue. If the board elects not to put it on as a formal article, then it will be discussed under other business, hearing the report from the ad hoc committee on whether to establish it. So it'll be discussed one way or the other, just whether it's under a formal article or under other business.
Just to clarify, if it's under a formal article and the body decides to create the commission, then it can be created.
Then it's created. Right.
If it's in new business and the report comes out and the body wants to create it, they have to wait until another town meeting to create it. Is that correct? Is that accurate?
With regard, and that's where it would be, to go to another town meeting would be the most formal way of creating that committee, because theoretically, this is where, and Mr. Agave is correct, the charter doesn't give us much direction here, because the charter in Addendum B says we can create committees. But the law is also that you can't take any binding action under other business. So if you go that route, that's why we would then have another special town meeting to take the formal action on that. Does that answer your question?
Yes. But there's a rub on that as well, because the Human Services Funding Committee was formed under other business, and it has become a fixture of the way we do our government does business, and that was addressed under other business and not as an article.
And that's where we have the difference between what we've done historically, and I think there are some other precedents too of other committees being formed under other business, most of which have just reported back, but some which have turned into, over the years, standing committees. So, and from time to time, whenever the charter is amended, the charter lists the standing committees, but it says right up in that section that these may change from time to time.
Ms. Turns?
Catherine Turnus, District 3. I was on the Futures Committee. I had to leave it because of health problems. And it seems to me, as a town representative, district town representative, and know what the town meeting is like when you get down to other business, you're absolutely lucky if you have enough people there awake to be able to decide whether they want to discuss this or not. And as an article, you have a chance not only to present what the ad hoc committee is going to present, but you also have a chance, the representatives have a chance to listen to whatever the planning board has to say about it. And at that point, it is a real democratic discussion. And I think it should be on as an article so it can be discussed before people fall asleep.
Dora.
Dora Bublis, District 3. I just want to say that, well, David is right that I routinely pointed out the fact that there is a process for getting these things on the agenda. One of the reason why it was changed in the charter was not what was to formalize the process, but to prevent the select board from not putting things on the agenda. So, and that's why that was changed in the charter, to say that if the citizens petitioned with the correct number of signatures, that it had to go on the warning, that you couldn't have the select board say, I'm gonna. So just to sort of clarify the reason why I was always bringing up the issue of process. The process, as far as putting things on the warning, is still arbitrary, because we do have this dual process in which the select board can decide or not decide whether to put something on. So we just had two things that were talked about earlier, that one which was withdrawn, and they just came from select board members sort of arbitrarily oh, let's put this on the warning. So you do have the ability to put these things on the agenda, and as Ms. Turner said, there is something about having something be more formal as an article and have it be discussed. And people can weigh in and say whether or not they think it's a good idea. They can talk about the different conflicts with different other processes. But and just from a note of, as you well know, I've stayed out of most of town business over the last year or so. But I am around town, and I have lots of conversations with people. And I have had conversations with a few people who actually joined this committee who have never been involved in anything having to do with the town. And I think there's something to be said for finding another avenue to get people who wouldn't normally be involved. And if this does nothing else, we will have accomplished something with it.
Thank you, Dora. I don't remember
That's
your
okay.
name. You spoke before.
You'll get to know me. I'm Cambria, and I've been approached by Spoon to be on this committee or commission or whatever it's going to be, because I'm in sustainability and sustainable infrastructure, and I know governance models. I just feel it's a really good way. In governance theory, there's a little bit of chaos is a good thing. And so it's been spoken to by a number of people that people come onto this committee that wouldn't normally serve on other committees. It's sort of creative force to bring in those voices that aren't often heard, which is really important in governance. It's also an opportunity to have it discussed at the meeting, is an opportunity for people like me who just moved here to learn about what it is, and maybe we want to get involved in it. It sort of formalizes its existence and allows people to know about it. So I'm really not even sure what it's about, so I would like to hear discussion around it. So I'd like to suggest that you do hold the discussion, that it does get on the agenda. And I want to support that little bit of chaos that can come in to the process that's sort of controlled chaos. We will have, Robert's rules, we'll have different ways of approaching the board, the select board, but there'll still be that little bit of think tank in there for people to consider where we want to go. When I moved here, I've been trying to get to Brattleboro for 10 years because there's so many people here who really approach things in a different way. And to give a formal area where they can come in and actually get involved in the process, I think is a really good thing. So I would encourage you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bria. Anybody else want to speak to the matter?
Here's this question. When it comes up, if we put it on, and I'm asking these stupid questions, just kind of want to clarify all of this. We put it on the way it's written, wherever it's written. I'm trying to figure out how to say this.
Need some help?
Well, I mean, we can change what it's, there's the liberty to change at town meeting what it says. So it might say something that we've written now, but we have the liberty to change it. You know, if somebody wants to get up and make it say something different.
The article needs to give fair notice of the topic for discussion and decision. And this article gives fair notice of the topic for discussion and decision as presented, being whether to form a permanent futures committee. And yes, it could be amended from the floor.
And it could be.
That's your question?
Yes, that's my question. That's the answer, yes.
Totally, it gives fair notice of the topic for discussion. Is there any need for further discussion? All right, so the motion on the floor is to determine if we're going to include an article on the town meeting warning as follows: to see if the town will vote to establish a committee of representative town meeting to be known as Committee of the Future. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. That carries 4-1. So the next item on our agenda tonight is to open and convene the second public hearing about proposed charter amendments. I understand that the town manager and the town manager secretary and maybe the town attorney are going to be leaving us for a little while to finalize the warning so we can vote on that next. So we're going to convene the public hearing, and I now formally open the second public hearing on the proposed charter amendments. The proposed charter amendments have been included in the in the select board meeting materials. They're also typed verbatim into what is draft 10 of the town meeting warning, because the town meeting warning includes the items that are going to go on the Australian ballot. And we now open for public comment, whether anybody wants to say anything about the proposed charter amendments. I will note that on our agenda for this evening that I can no longer find, that there actually are two different parts of this discussion. The first being this public hearing, and that will segue into some discussion by the board about whether it wants to take any steps in connection with the proposed charter amendments. So, public hearing is open. Anybody who wants to speak to the proposed charter amendments? Mr. Dimes.
A point of order about the statement of the board. Mr. Chairman, is that something that's already been discussed by the board?
No, it's on the agenda for discussion by the board.
Good. I move that we adjourn to a date certain.
Mr. Dimes, you don't have the ability to move. This is a select board meeting.
No, this is a hearing. This is a hearing, not a meeting now. This is a hearing.
So
it has a separate warning, and the warning has been violated.
Okay.
Because it was for 5:15. It was violated last week also. So people are already tired. Some people are missing already. And I think it would be constructive and respectful to give the proper time to the hearing, starting at the...
I understand what you're saying. Go ahead. What's your motion?
Couldn't we adjourn to a date certain?
public hearing needs to be convened and
rewarned.
I don't think that then the item can't be on the ballot because we have 2 public hearings, and it's got to be today, I believe.
Couldn't we ask Mr. Fisher if there's a way to do that? I mean...
Well, the town attorney has left the room. We're going to, well...
It has to go to print, right?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to the question, Mr. Dimes. I'll have to confer with the town attorney about whether you have standing to make the motion, and I'll have to confer with the town attorney about whether, hold on, and I would have to confer with town attorney about whether a hearing could be convened another time, but we will hear from Ms. Cappy, the town clerk. I mean, I think it's a public hearing to take comment. It's a select board meeting.
I don't think there's any authority to postpone it. I think by law, there are specific dates, and this is the second hearing, and it has to be heard within 10 days of the first. And we're right towards the end. I don't think you can.
So, Mr. Dimes.
So this is what we got.
Something else you want to say?
Yes, please.
Go ahead, you had the mic.
I would like to speak for approximately 7 minutes on the amendments.
Go for it.
Okay. The amendments are motivated by, in part, the disillusionment of the people of Brattleboro with their town government. And the way the disillusionment shows up is that people don't show up at town meeting. The voter participation is way down, voter turnout and participation in the town committees. Finance committee doesn't have anybody on it except Mr. Wilmerding. So these amendments were drafted by our attorney and me and a couple other people with some input from other people, but mostly they're drafted by Mr. Gillies, who also drafted some of the amendments which came into effect in 2012, the good ones. There are some flaws in these. There's some minor flaws, technical problems. They can be repaired by the state legislature if they are approved by the people. Those are mostly just little things like punctuation and missing phrase about the time for the election. The election should be on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. And moving the town meeting to November will provide for better turnout and for a cheaper process. The other technical issue has been raised is the grouping of the amendments. Mr. Gartenstein had some objections to that. I think it's really a small matter. In truth, the charter is going to be affected in 16, no less than 16 sections and subsections to be added and amended. If we were to have an amendment, a separate petition for 16 charter amendments, Annette, our honored town clerk, would not like to verify 18,000 signatures, right? Or 1,800 signatures. That would be a lot. So these amendments are grouped into three petitions for the convenience of the town clerk and for the convenience of the people. They're easier to vote on. They apply to two articles of the town charter, Article 2 and Article 3. And they are grouped first with the youth vote amendment, which is provided so that young people can have a sort of a learner's permit to vote. This is on its own petition because it is the only one where there's much contention. Brattleboro Common Sense did surveys going back more than a year, and we found all from way back, it's always roughly even. People of all different kinds, conservative, whether it's conservative or liberal or young or old or this party or that party, the split is still 50-50. It's an interesting issue because it doesn't follow any political lines, any demographic lines. That's on its own vote. The other amendments, which are about restoring free speech, traditional measures of free speech, which were regrettably taken away by the representative town meeting in 2011. Those other amendments are divided into two petitions. They include restoration of the people's rights to call for petitions. It is true that the ability of the select board to interfere has been eliminated, but at the same time, the ability to interfere has been given to the representative town meeting. So that people can only bring things to a vote once a year. Now, this has already had repercussions. During the budget debates of last May, the people were unable to bring a resolution about the budget or a resolution about the police fire project or a resolution or an ordinance about the skate park to a vote. They couldn't bring it to a vote. It wouldn't have been on the ballot until this March because of the interference of the representative town meeting in the amendments that they gave themselves, in the authorization they gave themselves to interfere with petitions. The other thing about ordinances, although the select board cannot block an ordinance petition, the representative town meeting can block the ordinance, because if you want to bring it up in March on one day, that's okay. Any other time of year, they can block it from the ballot. It was a terrible mistake that they did this. I'll read part of the charter, just about the ordinances. It used to be, before 2012, Article 3, Section 2B, the select board or school directors, upon receipt of such petition, shall place the article on the warning for the next town meeting or town school district meeting. Very simple. You get the petition, it goes to the people. But now, as of 2012, the select board or school directors, upon receipt of the petition, shall place the article on the warning for the next representative town meeting. And then later, a binding article passed by the representative town meeting shall be acted on by the voters of the town. So only if the representative town meeting says, okay, do the people get to vote on the things that they want to vote on. It was a terrible mistake, and the amendments will restore the right of petition for the people. Other things include a budget veto, which is loosely called budget veto. This allows for the people to get a little bit more time to arrange a referendum on expenditures of $2 million or more. Thank you for your note, Mr. Gardenstein. It is an onerous thing to collect the petitions for those for these charter amendments. And for you to say, oh, Mr. Agave should just do it, it's not a big deal. That was teamwork for 6 or 8 people involved in varying degrees. It's a lot of work. And Mr. Agave was doing it the right way. The people were very upset about the budget crises last year, and they were saying that they wanted our surveys and talk. We did formal surveys on lots of things. This was not one, but this is just my general impression. The people were asking for the right to vote on the budget all the time. They wanted the budget to come directly to them. And I think that they would find that's a lot of work. So we came up with this compromise about just making it easier if they really feel strongly about objecting to it or proposing it by referendum. Since people will have the right to bring more ordinances to the ballot. We also want to restore the town grand juror. And the town grand juror would have a function as a sort of a local district attorney, but he has a very low salary, I think $500 or something by statute. And it would not be expensive like having another police officer. He would also be involved in enforcement of the pay-as-you-throw or any other local legislation. One more thing about the role of the representative town of the select board now. Last week there was an objection by Ms. Bublis to your suggestion, Mr. Gardenstein, that the select board should take its own position. Part of the reason for the history of amendment changes and the regrettable history of court action against the board is the inexplicable tendency to adjudicate on matters that come on your desk, as you did with Mr. Agave's proposal, and I believe improperly. You do have administerial functions, and in your capacity now, do you know what your function is now? You know you're sitting there, but do you know which of your functions you're supplying now? I believe it is under Article 4. You have 15 or so specific duties. And one of them is, it's letter P, I think it says, to provide for the orderly conduct of meetings and hearings. That's what you're doing now. You're not to, judge it. You're not to judge something. You're here to just make sure the meeting is orderly. So last week, when Dora said it would be improper or you should remain neutral, Mr. Scholes was understandably offended, almost offended. He said, no, that would be censorship. That's not censorship. You had a function, and you were free to express yourself as an individual in the newspapers and in the hearing, too. But to convene separately would be improper. And Ms. O'Connor said, what are we supposed to do? Isn't that what we're supposed to do? The answer is, with respect. No, that is not what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to, as a group, express your opinion on things. You're supposed to just, put things on the ballot, make sure things are in order. So I hope you do that and consider your just role in this process. We have, I think, interference of the board in these amendments now would really be very discouraging and upsetting to the people who see their democracy in crisis. And I'll read our attorney's opinions on this issue of the board interfering. In Chapter 3, these are the opinions of Paul Gillies. In Chapter 2, Section 42, there is a basic right of those who reach the full age of 18 to vote in general and state elections. The election would prohibit a charter from setting a higher age for local elections because the Constitution is the expression of rights, limiting government from interfering with that which it guarantees. But it cannot be read to prohibit municipal charters, which are essentially state statutes, that provide rights to younger persons. This was in response to an earlier attempt by town government to block one of our amendments from the ballot. On September 26th, more generally, Mr. Gillies writes, state law gives the voters the right to propose amendments to a town charter and is written to ensure that the town doesn't get to interfere with that process. Article 17, Vermont statutes annotated, Section 2645. It was written specifically to prevent efforts to prevent select boards and councils from keeping new ideas from being voted. That has happened again and again. It has always been a mistake. There will be a time and a place for a discussion of the constitutionality. He's talking about the amendments. In the legislature, when the proposal becomes a bill, the idea of a town deciding not to warn a petition of a charter amendment is not, I believe, part of the town's authority, as it might, for instance, exercise in the case of other petition articles where there is no legal basis. And I'll also mention Mr. Gillies wrote Article 2645 in the state constitution. Thank you.
Is there anybody else in attendance who wants to speak to these charter amendments? Ms. Cartwright?
Lori Cartwright, Brattleboro, District 3. I was here last week. Thank you for convening a second public hearing. And my recollection was that this board has already agreed that they do not have the authority to block the petitioned items from being presented to the voters. So I invite everyone who has a comment to comment, but I think that what happened maybe a couple of agenda items ago was that people didn't hear the board already commit to vote in a certain way, and then a lot of people were upset and came up and said why you should vote in a certain way. So I just was trying to gather that. If someone could affirm for me that the board had mentioned that last week.
Well, this is a different procedural posture in which we find ourselves than what I was referring to before. We have received a petition with a sufficient number of signatures, and the petition calls for ballot articles to be voted on by Australian ballot on March 3rd in these three groups. And we have a public hearing requirement that has to be satisfied in connection with proposed charter amendments that are presented in this manner. And so this is a public hearing for comment by any person about any issue relating to these proposed charter amendments that are going to be on the ballot. So I think that it is the proper time for people to express views and positions about it. And we would encourage everybody to do so.
Certainly, and I just wonder if you could confirm, though, that the board has already acknowledged that it doesn't have the authority to stop it from going forward to the voters.
I've already said any number of times that the receipt of the signatures on the petitions supporting these three proposed ballot items results in them being on the Australian ballot on the 3rd of March, and the purpose of this hearing is to discuss the proposed amendments, not to decide whether or not they're going to be on the ballot.
Thank you.
Mr. McCaffrey.
Ken McCaffrey, Brattleboro, citizen of the realm. I wanted to speak in favor of Article 3 of these several petitions. And some years ago, the town of Brattleboro established the representative town meeting, and is quite proud of the fact that it's unique and so forth. And the idea was that it was a good step forward because the town was big, with a small town, some 8,000 voters. Couldn't have a town meeting with that many people, so the 150 or so people was put together as a representative town meeting. As Mr. Dimes pointed out, somewhere around 1911 or 12, the representative town meeting altered the charter to make it more difficult for people in the town, not the representative town meeting, but the people in the town, to bring a petition before the town.
which is what's going on now. And the purpose of Article 3 is to reverse that, and essentially, without going into all the legalese detail, is essentially to make it easier for the people of this town to bring something up and get it on the town ballot. Part of the proposal is less signatures, part of it is the not on only certain days and so forth, and also that the representative town meeting members do not have a role in saying, no, you can't do that. So I would urge the citizens of Brattleboro to vote yes on Article 3, because in a nutshell, it is trying to make it easier for the people of Brattleboro to get something on the ballot and then vote on it. All it's asking is to get it on the ballot. That seems like a fairly straightforward thing. Then if it's going to pass or fail, well, that's up to the town. So, I urge the people to vote yes on Article 3. Exercise your power. You're all citizens of the realm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCaffrey. Anybody else who's in attendance want to speak to the charter amendments? Yes, ma'am.
Marilyn Chiarello. I'm not sure what district I'm in. I'm new to Brattleboro.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
You sat through the whole meeting.
I
Thank
sure
you.
as hell did. Well, one of the things that really appeals to me that is being proposed is to vote on Election Day. I went to vote the first year I was here. This was my second election day this year, so it was 13. I walked down to the high school. I live down in that area, so I don't know, is that District 2?
Yes.
Yes.
I live
Annette
on
knows.
Moreland Avenue.
Yes.
So, I don't know if that's named after Mr. Moreland here.
So he came.
He was named after it.
Oh, I got it. I thought it was because there was more land and they decided to build up there and develop that area. Anyway, I walked down to the high school and said, wow, you know, I don't see any area with this polling booths or anything. I walk in and they asked me, what's, I said, well, it's election day. And they said, oh, no, we don't vote here when there's not, we only vote in March. And being from New York, I mean, I'm out there every election day to vote for my local things, whatever's going on. So that was really like enlightening me, or just, wow, what is that about? So the fact that it's not on election day doesn't make sense to me. And now learning that there's very little voter participation, I can understand why. I certainly can. So I certainly applaud you for putting that into this article, and everything else makes sense to me. But that was one that definitely, I can really say, affected me a lot when I first moved here. So, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else who's in attendance want to speak to the proposed charter amendments? All right. I'm once again going to briefly address some concerns about the charter amendments as proposed. I think it's important for those things to be in the record here. The Vermont State Constitution says that the voter's age is 18. So it's not a statute, it's the Vermont State Constitution. People under age 18 can't enter into legally binding contracts in the state of Vermont, and they can't appear in court without a guardian appearing with them. So although the idea of a learner's permit for voting may be interesting, I have serious concerns about the legality of the provision relating to allowing people at age 16 to vote at town meetings. We did have an opinion from the town attorney which suggested we had the authority to keep it off the ballot based upon the fact that it would appear to be illegal, but we've chosen not to do so. And it's going to appear on the ballot, but I just don't see how it can become law consistent with Vermont's Constitution and the rest of the laws of the state of Vermont. As to Article 3, first off, I don't really understand the suggestion that somehow the ability to have an ordinance presented in a timely manner is limited by the current draft of the charter. because I have the draft of the charter amended July 2013. Is that the current one in it? Right? And what the charter says now is that if the town meeting falls within 60 days after receipt of the petition for an ordinance, then it's included on the warning that for the meeting that happens within 60 days. Otherwise, a special representative town or town school district meeting shall be called within 60 days after receipt of the petition. So the way I read the charter, you already have the ability to present your ordinance within 60 days after the petition is presented. So I don't really understand, quite frankly, what it is that these changes would accomplish as to the timing of a vote on an ordinance. Creating a special procedure for challenging budget items over $2 million seems to me to be likely to create more confusion than anything else. If we believe that votes by the population as a whole to challenge or to question things that happen at town meeting should take longer to collect signatures and should be based on less signatures, it should apply to everything. For example, the way this has been written and presented, by Brattleboro Common Sense, the pay-as-you-throw article from a number of years ago would be treated differently from a $2 million article. And that, to me, doesn't make any sense. It really actually just engenders confusion, from what I can see. I have an article here from the Reformer indicating that there's a vast number of unfilled seats at town meeting. To impose term limits on town meeting members, I think would be to destroy that form of government at this point, because there's lots of people who like participate in town meeting, who've been there for longer than 6 years, and who won't be able to attend. And the notion that we're going to empty out town meeting to encourage other people to participate, to me, is really just destructive of the current process. If we want to open the process up further, then maybe we should stop having representative town meeting, or maybe we should expand the number of town meeting representatives. Well, it doesn't make a lot of sense because we can't even fill the number of seats we have. But to impose term limits, that means that people who want to attend and who attend regularly because they're interested in participating in the town's government can attend. That's anti-democratic in my view. I've said before, I think the provision relating to paid leave for employees as written extends to people voting in other towns, and it means that Brattleboro is then supporting activities in other towns at the expense of local merchants. I don't really see the use of the grand juror provision under these circumstances or any demonstrated need that's being addressed by it. And all this provides for in terms of changing the election date is that we would elect town meeting members and vote on ballot articles in November. We have a long-standing, well-established form of local governance, which is separate from the November elections, that says we do local elections in March and we have town meetings in March. And to separate the elections on town meeting representatives and make them in November when town meeting still happens in March, again, I don't understand the policy behind it. So I think that these provisions are particularly create a particular risk of destructiveness with respect to the town government, and I can't support almost any of them. Anybody else on the board have anything they want to say? Mr. Dimes?
Mr. Gartenstein, you read from which section there? Article 2, Section 2, subparagraph 2. The date, if the date of the representative town meeting and so forth. Let me clarify that for you. If the date of the next representative town meeting or school district meeting falls within 60 days after the receipt of the petition, and if the petition is presented with sufficient time to be legally warned for the meeting, it shall be included as an article on the warning for that meeting. Otherwise, a special representative town meeting or school district meeting shall be called. You overlook the fact that the representative town meeting has been substituted for the general people's vote. Yes, it can get to a vote almost any time, but it is a vote of the representative town meeting. So the representative town meeting is interposed between the petition and the people. You understand now? You raised another point, which is very well taken, about the term limits. It does seem, at first blush, to be, you might say, as Mr. Garstein said, undemocratic, because many people want to participate, and they comprise a majority of the representative town meeting now. However, the reason people do not run is not because they think it's hard to be a candidate for the office. The reason they don't run is they don't want to be part of the representative town meeting as it is presently composed. They want it to be have a different flavor. They want it to be a different attitude in there. They don't want to be a part of that body, which is the same body year after year after year. They will not run, they will not join that body if they think, like many of them said, they're just going to be outnumbered or it's just going to be that same stodgy bunch. They're afraid that their voices would be lost in that entrenched group. So the way to have democracy is to really make some room there, a big amount of room. That's what the people want. They want a big change at the RTM. They don't want just the chance for themselves to run. And if the amendment passes, I'll be glad to get out. Then you had also, Mr. Bartstein, some objections to the voting leave. I don't think Brattleboro is so selfish that we do not want to extend full democracy to people who live outside of Brattleboro and work in town. We want democracy for everyone. And and as a matter of fact, I'm sure Mr. Fisher will testify that it would be outside the jurisdiction of Putney to require voting leave for its residents who work in Brattleboro. Isn't that right, Mr. Fisher?
Without looking into it, I'm not going to give an off-the-cuff opinion on something like that. Okay.
Anyway, I'll say, Putney can't tell Putney can't tell Brattleboro employers to give their employees a 0.1% raise in effect so that they can vote. And that's all that the voting leave amounts to. 0.1% to say that the town wants poor or low-wage earner people to vote. That's all it takes. 0.1% is what it amounts to if you have a full-time job. I think that covers all but one of your questions. Thank you.
Anybody else who's in attendance want to speak?
Yeah, I just want to say a couple of things. I think it does a disservice to people who are town meeting representatives now to say they're a stodgy bunch. I think that's a very subjective thing to say, and I think it's very, very subjective to say everybody doesn't want to participate in town meeting because of the people that are already there. So I want to clarify that, because I could equally, I could equally go out and find a group of, as many people of you said that, I can find a group of people that enjoy town meeting. So I just want to put that out there to make a blanket statement that everybody hates town meeting isn't true. I really feel like I have to say that. And second of all, when you're talking about the paid leave for people to vote, I think you have to remember that in the town of Brattleboro, as in Windham County, as is the state of Vermont, most of the employers in this town are small business owners. Yes, we have GS Precision. Yes, we have, Bradford Machines. We have big ones, but a lot of them are small business owners. And I think if you were to walk down Main Street to the merchants, who actually a lot of them run their own store and they have like one part-time or other employee, I think we have to keep that into consideration, that, this could be a hardship on the business owners, the mom and pop stores. So I just have to say that there's more to that piece than I think is being portrayed, because, it may sound easy, but it isn't.
David?
There are two things I want to say. One is the vote for the 16-year-olds. There's some evidence that encourages people to vote for the rest of their lives as well. If they start voting earlier, they vote longer. So for that reason, I think that it's worth having a go at amending the state's constitution, and if it starts with a vote in Brattleboro, that's fine with me. I think it's worth opening up the conversation and letting it go forth. As far as term limits, I would like nothing better than to be able to kick all the people out of the government in Washington that I don't like, or to limit their terms. But that's not how democracy works. Democracy is when the people vote for their representatives, and I think that's the way it works. We're stuck with it, and I would rather leave it that way and leave it up to the voters, not up to arbitrary decision that some number of years is enough time. I don't think it has anything to do with the number of people that volunteer. We have, I don't know how many dozens of people that volunteer on committees, ad hoc and standing committees in this town. The other thing is that I also like the tradition of town meeting in Vermont. I think it's not just quaint and interesting and nice. It's really the most basic form of democracy still existing in this country. And I think to toy with it and to move the elections around so that it's more convenient is really a terrible idea. I think we should maintain it and strengthen it as much as possible in the face of all the pressure there is to consolidate and centralize power in all sorts of areas. I think the most basic form is the town meeting, and there's just no reason. There's not a good reason. Just convenience is not a good enough reason to change it. So that's what I think.
Anybody else on the board? Anybody else who's in attendance? The only remaining issue besides the warning that we're going to be presented with for approval is that, contrary to the comments that were made by the proponent of the charter amendments, in fact, the Select Board does have the authority and the ability to engage in public education efforts about the potential impact of these proposed charter changes. And I will be proposing and suggesting that the board should actively be involved, and that we should begin an effort to scope out what it would look like to gather information and circulate it about the impact of these potential charter change provisions. And what I'd like to do is to ask the town manager to do a little bit of homework between now and Tuesday before our next select board meeting as to what form that could take.
Yeah.
So I guess what I want to hear is whether the board is interested in doing that or not.
I forgot we have a meeting on Tuesday.
Yeah, we're back to every week now. I miss you guys. It's too easy to learn.
Yep.
Yes, I am interested in
All right.
hearing what our options
John, you are?
Yep.
Don, you are?
I think it's,
All right.
we all are entitled to our opinions, and if we happen to share them and want to put something forward as a unanimous position of the board, I see nothing
All right.
wrong with it.
So,
We're
Dora?
citizens like everybody else.
Yep.
Dora Bulis, District 3. I just want to strongly encourage you guys to stay neutral as a body on this. That doesn't mean that individually you shouldn't speak out. If you want to ensure a larger voter turnout and people voting for something, people voting a way they might not have voted, then by all means, make sure you take a stand against the amendments. If you don't want to ensure that, then I would suggest you, as a body, don't take a stand.
Any further discussion? So we'll add an item to the February 3rd agenda. And Peter, if you would just, think about, present some ideas back to us for discussion by the board about how we can engage in some public outreach and education in response to these charter amendments, or proposed charter amendments. Any further discussion? So we're going to close the public hearing, second public hearing that had to be held within 10 days of the first one on the proposed charter amendments at 10 to 9. And the last item on the agenda is to approve the warning for town meeting on, well, it's the warning for both the Australian ballot on March 3rd and then the town meeting on March 21st. Ms. Anderson, do you have a series of warnings for us to look at?
Good reading stuff.
School meetings first.
It is.
Oh, good.
What that means
is only a little bit of.
Sorry, Janet. We go to the last Right.
What I would do is I would encourage everybody, please, to read through the warning, and then there's going to be a motion to adopt it as presented. So, everybody please look up when you're ready. Didn't the school go first last year?
Yes.
No. No.
They didn't?
No, second.
Oh, that's right.
We went first.
That's right.
So when we first.
It was the
So
year
it was 2
before.
years ago that the
It was the
school
year
got trouble?
before that they got in trouble.
How the years run together.
Yes.
I guess I would be term limited off the town meeting.
Go first.
Yeah. Poor Jim
Right?
Kane.
Every term limited off the town meeting. No?
Poor
Yeah,
Jim
he'd be
Kane.
tired after that.
Who gets to read the Human Services one this year?
We'll discuss
I guess
that
you
later.
will now.
That's always a good one. So we left the $20,000 in for the skip.
Yeah, because you were in the.
Right. I'm looking up. Jim, you did a good job.
Our town attorney should take credit for that.
Oh, really? Well, not giving too much credit. Although it is late.
So the only question I have in reviewing this is whether the 1% local option sales tax article is properly heard before or after the budget. In the past, we've sort of wound up discussing them together.
Right.
And it may be that it's appropriate to put it before the budget article, simply because it winds up informing the rest of the discussion.
That's
And that's what
exactly
we've
the
done in the
reason why
past.
we put it there before the budget.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but that's my only question in reviewing this.
No, it is before the budget. Right?
Yes.
It is.
Bob,
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to the question.
Yeah.
Bob, I didn't catch this earlier and should have, but the unassigned fund balance items, both of them, say it just that way. And I don't know whether it's necessary to be this precise, but it seems like it would be helpful to say unassigned general fund balance, particularly on the item that relates to capital expenditures. Make sure that it's understood that that's
That
the
makes
unassigned
sense.
general fund balance.
All
We
right,
can
so.
plug in the word general fund in front of each of that, but.
I move to adopt the annual town and town school district meeting warning for March 3 and March 21, 2015 as presented, with the amendment that the word general will be inserted before the words fund balance in Article 19, and that in Article 20, similarly, the article will read with the words all initial caps, unassigned general fund balance.
I guess putting that word general in, when we go down through and we have the unassigned fund balance, that's the unassigned fund balance of the entire town side of the ledger, though, absent your enterprise funds and whatnot.
I don't believe they properly have
I'm just
a
trying-
unassigned fund balance. I think it is town-wide, but I think it,
But it is the
It's the general
It's
fund.
the general fund.
All right.
Yeah.
We can amend that at town meeting if there's a
I'm fine
question
with
as
that.
to
Just-
it being legal.
John O'Connor would be able to answer that more precisely, but
Hopefully
that's
he's
fine
not
if we put that in. We know what we're talking about.
That's where I'd like to be. All right, is there any further discussion?
No.
Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the warning as amended and as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Is there any other business to come before the meeting? We're ready for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion to adjourn. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed or abstaining? Carries 5-0. Thank you, BCTV. Thank you, members of the press. Thank you, everybody who attended and everybody who's watched at any point. We didn't have the sign language.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Don't go away.